Hello and welcome to EXP Required, where we talk about Final Fantasy and other things. I'm Jack, and am, as always, joined by Mole. How are you doing, Mole?
You know what, Jack? I'm having a really good day today. I've been so excited, not just for this particular episode, which, as I'm sure you can agree, you've been looking forward to as well, but also because we once again get our very good friend May, or Game Dove, back on with us.
Hi,
Friend
guys.
of the podcast. I like saying that.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be back.
Well done on your, I don't know what exact number is at the moment, but it's over 3,000 subscribers. So
yeah,
well done.
Wonderful number. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a little bit insane, like seeing more and more people come in and be like, oh, like Game Dove, have you seen Game Dove's video? And I'm like, yeah, I have. But like, how have you guys seen it? Where are you all coming from? What the hell? There's so many people here now. It's such an honor that people like my videos and want to hang around.
Well, the thing is, May, is that if you didn't create really good content, people wouldn't be coming back for more. So really, this is your fault. I think you're right.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. And back at you guys. So congrats on your over 1,000 subscribers now.
Thank you.
Rock and
Like,
roll.
yeah, like
Thank
you said,
you.
it's mind-boggling, really.
Yeah.
I did well up a bit when we got over it because I've been trying for years to get multiple channels over 1,000
And you
subscribers.
finally did it. So a big thank you to everyone who actually listens to these kinds of things. You were part of the part of the problem. I was about to say that's not right. Part of the solution here. Thank you to our audience and probably to a couple of people who came over from May's channel as well.
Yeah,
so
I think
thank
that's
you.
fair to recognise as well, because I think your episode is one of our most listened to.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I'm assuming
no
there's
pressure.
probably a few conversions from your fan base. So
You were just trying to steal them.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. Hello, May's gang. I don't know if you've got like a name for your fans.
Oh God.
The Dovelings. I don't know.
Oh Jesus.
Game chicks.
Game Chicks is amazing. I like that.
Game chicks. Wow. Oh God.
I'll be
oh,
collecting my check later.
yeah.
That sounds like Charlie's Angels.
Yeah. I'm frightened of the concept of having like a name for people who enjoy watching my videos because I feel like that makes me like a small cult leader. I grew up Catholic, so I just feel like I'm not prepared for that, you know?
All hail Pope May. Anyway,
Game Pope.
so today we're going to be talking about a game that was unreleased. Jack, what are we talking about?
We're talking about Final Fantasy Versus 13. I think this is my fault we're talking about this.
100%.
Because
100%.
I remember in the last episode, May said that she was a Final Fantasy Versus 13 truther. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think it was my idea to get anyone interested in it, but it's my idea to talk about it. So I don't know what I was getting myself into, because this is the most impossible topic to really pinpoint and understand.
Yeah, this one's a
certainly in Final
difficult one
Fantasy,
to research.
but it's been fun and definitely interesting. So I think the first thing I'll do is I'll put a question to May. What's your history with Versus 13?
Oh goodness.
How long have we got?
Yeah, really. So as a young person, I really only remembered the tail end of Final Fantasy 15 coming out. I would see like people playing it online. I would see the trailers. I would see the fandom arguments about it, because as a young person, I used to, I think I've addressed it already in one of my videos, but yeah, I used to like write Percy Jackson fan fiction. I was like, this is what the world needs.
Cool.
Fuck yeah.
So I was seeing in like fan fiction spaces just this huge, overwhelming influx of 15 content. And it was at the time it had just come out. So it was such a fraught kind of topic. And I kind of started looking into it more, going like, what the hell are these people talking about? And I remember coming across probably the most famous Versus trailer, which is the 3D signing party where Noctis and
Yes.
Stella meet for the first time. And I remember just going, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Holy crap. After that, I was like, this is such an interesting, nearly like an internet mystery. I kind of kept up with it then and was like, I played 15 a little bit, as in I haven't played the 2018 version, which I have been told fundamentally is a totally different game from the 2016
It's the Royal
version.
Edition, right?
Royal Edition, yeah.
Yeah, with all the DLC. Yeah.
Yeah, so at the time I was just so annoyed that you had to pay for, I think it's 3 additional pieces of DLC for the base game story to make sense. And I just thought, like, you know what, I'll just watch the cutscenes on YouTube. I'm so sorry, I'm not paying money. I've already bought this game. I'm not paying money for the rest of it. I'll watch the cutscenes on YouTube. So that's what I did. And totally fair, like anybody I know who's ever played the game is like, no, like you have to just consider the 2016 version to just be sort of like a base, and the 2018 is functionally a better game and more cohesive a story, which I totally get. But at the time I was so annoyed that you paywalled the story.
I still feel like that. You know, I
Yeah, so do
definitely
I.
consider the original release and the Royal Edition to be completely separate things as well, because functionally they kind of are. But I'm still annoyed by it, and it's been almost 10
I know,
fucking
yeah.
years.
So I think what's the question, I guess, from that, May, is what do you think of Final Fantasy 15 then? Like, do you like Final Fantasy 15? Or because we have interesting opinions about that game, to say the least.
I like a lot of the game. Visually, it is an absolutely stunning game.
Yeah.
I love a lot of the character designs in that game. I love a lot of the world designs in that game. I really enjoyed walking around most of the playable areas in that game. I really do think parts of it are really enjoyable. Lots of people have said, and it's the reason why, even though it's a kind of a controversial game, is that it's often so well defended among its fan base, is because there's a great sort of camaraderie between the main four guys.
It's the vibes more than
It's the
the
vibes,
actual final
yeah.
product.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Some parts of it have definitely left kind of a bad taste in my mouth. Like, I have a whole thing about Luna Freya. It got stronger. It got stronger when I researched this video. I realized, like, for all of their talk, you create this character, and we'll get into it later, but when Square Enix debuted Luna Freya's character, on 2 separate occasions, they made a point of saying, unlike Stella, who was weak and a worse female character, Luna Freya is strong and independent, and we have the better character.
I remember hearing that too.
Ooh,
and
dear.
then what did we get?
And I think, I think if you're, it's kind of a controversial one, because people will then say, oh, so you think that just because women don't fight that they're not strong? No, I've never said that. I don't believe that. I've made an entire video defending Renoa, a character who gets the same sort of backlash. I don't believe that. I just have a thing that if you're going to have a character who's largely a huge amount of her exposition, particularly in the 2016 version, is off screen. A lot of the things that happen to her happen off screen. She has 13 lines of dialogue in the 2016 version, certainly with Noctis. Most of her appearances are
you
in
serious?
flashback.
It's only 13?
That was the whole thing. Like,
That's because they've got to plan that. That's got to be a perfect number, hasn't it? It's got to be something to do with versus 13, isn't it?
Now, obviously, in the Royal Edition, she gets slightly more lines. There's a couple of more
14
scenes added with her. Yeah, it doesn't bump it up to be that sort of exposition that would have been required, and I think, quite frankly, would have been deserved.
Yeah. Luna Freya is her entire character is just wasted potential.
Exactly,
like a lot of 15 in my opinion, but that's I've already expounded upon that in our 15 episodes.
Yeah,
so.
Definitely. I joked and said, "Who's Luna Freya?" Because you don't really see her at all. I mean, I think that the narrative, the way it's told of like Noctis's whole journey is to get to Luna Freya, and then the tables flipped on him. I quite liked the idea of that, but I think she was so underserved with that narrative. It shouldn't have been. It should have been her that she was removed. They could have done something more with that. I mean, I have a very fraught relationship with the game, because I think that the game I started playing, I don't think I finished. And I remember the first part of the game really enjoying it, and I still feel like I've never finished that experience. And of course, researching some of this stuff that I'm relatively new to has been interesting, because it kind of fills in the blanks. It's difficult because you can project your own thoughts and what you want on something that didn't exist, but it does feel to me like it would have scratched the itch a bit more.
Very quickly, before we start talking about Versus 13, my question to you is, have you played Final Fantasy 13? Because that's the other half of this equation that's relatively important.
Yeah, well, now this might be the other make or break, is that I actually, not the first 13, but 13-2 in my top 5 all-time Final Fantasy games.
Really?
I enjoyed 13-2 so much. But again, I think like my relationship with 13-2 is probably other people's relationship with 15, where they're like, listen, I know there are parts of this that are just shocking, but the vibes alone are so fun. And that's what I felt with 13-2. Like, the vibes of this are so much fun. I did not enjoy Lightning Returns. I won't say anything about Lightning Returns. I did not like that game. But I think Final Fantasy 13, problematic playing experience. Like, there were things that made it just not that fun to play, but I liked a lot of the characters, and I really liked the kind of the Lassie, the Falsey ideas. I loved that theming. I loved that plot line. I loved a lot of the Fabula Nova Crystallis stuff, so I was so interested in it that I was kind of maybe more forgiving of it, and so that's why I was kind of really excited for Versus 13. I kind of look back and I go, oh, That would have been so much fun. But then that's the whole argument, you see, and that's the argument a lot of 15 fans in particular make is you have decided that this game you never got would have been superior based off of the vibes of a trailer that may or may not have been reflective. Now, I have thoughts on that, but I do think it's a solid point that like we'll never know. You know what I mean?
Unless they make it.
We'll get to that later.
Well, yes, certainly. Well, don't know where you guys are on your Kingdom Hearts lore, but this is a very bad time to be a Kingdom Hearts fan. It's the longest and emptiest drought between Kingdom Hearts games that anybody's ever experienced. So we're all a little bit feral at the moment, particularly with that Remind DLC and everything, and the trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4. And
you remind me, how many years has that been now since that trailer?
Oh God, it is
2019, wasn't it?
So
pre-COVID.
It's 2019 was when Kingdom Hearts 3 dropped. The Remind DLC was 2020, and the trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4 was 2022. It's literally just gone 3 years. It was April 2022. When I tell you we've heard nothing about the game, nothing. For Kingdom Hearts 3, the wait was long, but they were telling us stuff, and they were doing like, 1.5 and Dream Drop Distance and Birth by Sleep. They were all coming out,
And buy this PSP game and watch the cutscenes, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and play this updated version of the first 2 games where all the cutscenes are added to the end because we were going to presume you didn't play this DS game that got discontinued because the software is no longer viable.
I can't help but think that Square Enix needs to stop releasing trailers so far in advance and then having nothing to back it up with for like actual years at a time, because this is now becoming a recurring problem.
Yeah, we're looking at you, the Final Fantasy VII tech demo.
Oh God!
How grow did that cause them? And eventually they had to go, you know what, we're going to spend billions on a remake project just because someone made a tech demo twice.
Oh, stop! Yeah.
So Final Fantasy Versus 13. 2006 was the beginning. I think it was the first time that it was announced as being a side project to Final Fantasy 13. So it was before Final Fantasy 13 came out. It was part of the... Can you want to say it, Mol? Because I can't pronounce it.
Fabula Nova Crystallis.
It's part of that. I'm not even going to embarrass myself because I'll get it wrong. It's part of that trilogy or quadrilogy it was going to be. We're going to have Agito or Agito and whatever was going to be in it. And it was all going to be this like shared lore experience. And my understanding was that Versus 13 was supposed to be like its alternate to 13.1. So it's Versus.
The color scheme. I hate that.
Yeah. So the color scheme was 13 vanilla then. The color scheme was opposite. So, you had a male protagonist with black hair, and it was more the realistic side of stuff, because of course it's a fantasy based on reality. And 13 was supposed to be the more fantasy elements, and 13 Versus 13 was supposed to be the more reality elements, this kind of light and dark thing, which are themes that still exists in 15. And of course, throughout the years, we'll go into it in a little bit more detail. There was trailers released, and then it's still coming, and then what's going on, which kind of seems a little bit like what you just described Kingdom Hearts was like, of who knows what's going on, let's just tease it and throw things around, you know what Square are like. And then eventually, in 2013, it was rebranded as Final Fantasy 15 and became a mainline entry, and the rest is history. So that's kind of the area we're talking about here, because obviously we've mentioned 15 there. I think we probably will jump into 15 every now and then.
There's no avoiding it, really.
So, that's just to frame it there before we go on.
So, 2006, I remember I wasn't watching that E3 live. I wasn't there. I think I must have been 13, 14. But I do remember seeing the trailer and having my mind blown, because at the time, for me personally, Square Enix could do no wrong. They were everything. I was so excited. I didn't get the chance to play Final Fantasy XII at that time, but I was still so deep in the source. There was still like 10 and 10.2 to absolutely rave over. It was a good time.
What can I do for you?
Good time back in the day. So when this new trailer dropped, and it was like, wow, they're doing something different, and not just like different, but different in my timeline, because obviously they'd done Tactics before, they'd done all the Chocobo racing games at that point. Like, it's not like they were new to spin-offs and side games, but this I was around for. I could recognize this was something cool. This is something that was gonna change the world and my life forever. And I mean, it did neither of those things. Yeah, it was one of those, like you said, darker and completely at odds to what 13 eventually ended up being. I was never really sure if that was something that they were actively going for, if it was just, we want to show a different side of this mythos. But now that you've said that, I can't really see anything wrong with it at all. Like, yeah, light and dark and completely makes sense.
To me, I remember watching this first trailer, which was the E3 announcement trailer, and then the follow-on trailer, which we'll get to, which is sort of similar. And I remember thinking it reminded me of Final Fantasy VIII, because obviously we've talked about, we've got May on, who's the Final Fantasy VIII connoisseur.
God.
The grounds of reality thing, the fact that you've got this, there's cars. It reminded me, the whole Noctis coming down the stairs bit reminded me of the Delling City bit at the end of the first disc of Final Fantasy VIII. And of course there's a quote, "There's nothing ever good or bad, but thinking makes it so," which is a William Shakespeare quote. Clearly no one was thinking when they made Final Fantasy 15, as it ends up being both good and bad somehow. Also, that quote reminded me of Final Fantasy VIII, because there's a quote in that Delling City section where they're going to assassinate the sorceress, and Squall turns around to Irvine and says, "There's no good or bad side, just two sides holding different views." And I do remember that quote and thinking that that's the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what excited me. So
how have I never picked that up before? Good damn, Jack.
God. As you were saying that, I was like, yes, I know that scene. They're walking to, they're walking to from Caraway's house to carry out the assassination. Squall is having one of his sort of internal searching monologues, and he's saying neither of us are good or bad. It's just that we're enemies. That's the only thing that separates us, is our point of view on something.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite quotes in that entire game.
And it's a theme that carries through the entire game. That's something that's stuck with me for years.
And I mean, E3 2006, that was a time of, I think, a lot of hope. When you look back, people were like, my goodness. But I think when you read the sort of post-mortems that the Final Fantasy 13 team did, one thing they say is that at the time of launching those trailers, they didn't have a really cohesive vision for what they wanted the whole FNC sort of universe to be. And that within the team of 13, that they had just loved the vibes so much that then coming together to kind of create in 13 more specifically than Versus, this was about, that the 13 team were kind of then struggled to go, okay, well, what do we put in this general vibe, and how do we build that in? So I think, looking back at those trailers, amazingly creative, but they would kind of in their own way become the symbols of this sort of promised and amazing vision that, because of sometimes outside forces, sometimes technical sources, would be a very long and painful road for everybody who worked on them.
I mean, as I understand it, the actual engine that they created for 13 and originally for Versus 13 as well hadn't even been created by this point. It was still another 2 years before Crystal Tools was even developed or announced. So
there's a quote from the Japanese magazine Gai Maga, I believe it's called, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, from Tetsuya Nomura, saying absolutely nothing has been done on the actual scenario. And however, I've had the plot worked out for some time. So that kind of alludes to what you're saying there, is essentially they were throwing ideas. I think a lot of the time, you mentioned the specifics of 2006. This was just before the PS3 was coming. I think it might have even been when the PS3 was announced. I'm not sure about that, but I know that at the time, graphics were the thing. Look how sexy we can make things look. I mean, obviously they still are to an extent, but we seem to be seeing the tail end of that sort of AAA over. Now, can we make someone look realistic? Stuff seems to be changing now. Whereas back in 2006, it was oh my, no, the PS2's better than the GameCube. It's got better graphics, even though it didn't. And there was loads of arguments in the playground about that kind of stuff. And it was all oh well, actually, this has got a better GPU than that one. And what can you do visually? So I think it was almost let's get everyone in by making a sexy, really good-looking thing. And to be fair, Square's always done that. They've always been cutting edge with graphics. It's their thing. Even when the games haven't been necessarily as good as we would have hoped, they've always delivered on that.
Yeah, I think back in the day, Square was probably best known for they're the people that make the really deep stories that go on for a really long time and you'll never know what's coming. And now it's so much less that and much more they still make absolutely gorgeous cinematics, which isn't a bad thing to be known for, but I wish they'd go back to the other thing.
It's almost like they're this is our thing, you've got to let us have it. It doesn't matter if we've got women on our game, as long as we've got sexy cutscenes, we're for it, it's fine. That's not my quote, that's not anyone's quote, just me taking the piss. So just to point it out for everyone that might be listening, this is the notable E3 that had the disastrous Sony press conference with Sony president Kaz Hirai with the whole Ridge Racer thing. You must have seen that.
That
was this year. Yeah, and there was also this was also the first reveal of Uncharted.
Wow.
And Bill Rich, who is the director of a game called Genji 3, was talking about giant enemy crabs. So they're memes that come from this
remember that
year.
meme. I didn't realise that came from then.
That's all from this year. So yeah, I thought I'd do a little bit of background stuff just to frame it a little bit. The Game Awards started in 2014, but there was the Game Developers' Choice started in 2000. So I'm going off that for this list. Do you know what their game of the year was in 2006?
Oh, gosh.
Haven't got a clue.
No, me
Just
neither.
to frame it a bit, it was Gears of War.
Right, okay.
And also just to frame it as well, the big releases this year for Square were Final Fantasy XII, Final Fantasy XI on Xbox 360, Final Fantasy III on DS, and the Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI advanced versions.
I always forget that Advance
okay.
was that late. I remember the FF3 announcement as well. And
that was the year before. That was amazing. I remember that. I nearly cried.
FF3 coming out didn't bother me so much as the FF4 announcement, which came a little bit later. That was what I ended up buying my DS for, so good times. Cool. Let's go back to the early 2000s, guys.
Just shows how long ago this was. This was 19 years ago.
Oh my God.
So just to bring us in, because obviously this tells the story of how long this development and non-development of this game was.
Jack, you've just ruined my
day. Sorry to interrupt you there, Mol, but yeah, I thought I'd tell that little bit of trivia. Giant enemy crabs, that's what we like. So I've got the next trailer, because that trailer was essentially the whole, I think it's Somnus playing where Noctis is on the throne. Not named Noctis at the time, he's named I think, male protagonist or something.
Yeah.
Dark-haired male protagonist. He walks down the stairs, gets his swords out, and then there's loads of Shakespeare quotes. The next trailer I've got was from something, it's going to be called the 2007 Cloud Volume 1 trailer, which is more or less the same thing, a slightly sexier version. There's more stairs in it, and I think he starts in a car, and it's called that because it was released from a magazine called Cloud Volume 1 by MediaWorks in Japan, which is the Noctis in the car, stairs scene. I remember this one more vividly. I remember the car a lot more, probably because it features a lot more later. I think someone must have uploaded this to GameSpot or IGN back in the day. I definitely remember teleporting as well, because this is the first time I think the teleporting features in. Right. You know, the whole Noctis jumping around thing.
Yeah, you mentioning the car and the stairs, that's honestly, if I hadn't gone back and rewatched these cutscenes, I was about to say, these trailers very recently in preparation for this episode, those probably would have been the only two things that I really remembered, because they were outstanding. Like the stairs in particular, Noctis walking down them, that was iconic, but also it felt like that was something that they focused on in every single trailer. You know, granted, these trailers weren't particularly long. They were, 2-3 minutes maximum, with a couple of exceptions. But yeah, they really went all in on that stair tech.
Well, so for me, this is 2007, and kind of like, as you were saying, for a bit of the context on it, this was around the time they still hadn't done any game development of this game. It was still in concept and scenario and art, because Crystal Tools was, I'm sure many people know, Crystal Tools was an absolute nightmare. But this was around the time when Tetsuya Nomura was being interviewed as the director of the game, and he was saying, we haven't done, and I'm paraphrasing of course, but we haven't done shit with this. So, like, he was developing a mobile game to go out at the time, and he was saying, like, I'm only focusing on this game, and we're only in like scenario development for this. And it was, I think, 2007 where he said Versus 13 is waiting on 13. Essentially, that Versus 13's progress couldn't begin until 13 was finished, because as far back as that E3 2006 press conference about the release of the trailer, Toriyama, who was the director of Final Fantasy 13, was saying that, like, we are focusing all of our efforts on this mainline game. This is where all the resources and investment is going to go, because Versus is sort of like a spin-off.
Which in hindsight is a sensible way of doing it too.
Certainly,
actually.
yeah. And they did not foresee that the development of 13 would be so difficult. And so in their minds, the game was going to come out, in a fairly reasonable time frame, and then everything would be fine. But even at that conference, they were stressing to people, like, we need to get 13 out of the way first. So the FNC team were kind of all hands on deck on 13. And because Crystal Tools hadn't been developed, and it was kind of Toriyama's idea, it was his wish, because of this, Versus was going to be the spin-off, that they use the Crystal Tools, they share the same engine to kind of keep that world the same.
Yeah.
So Versus really had no option but to wait until Crystal Tools was developed, and then 13 was finished developing. And then, of course, as we know, those were two very rocky roads. And then there was the whole later thing of when they had finished Final Fantasy 13 and they had finished the development of Crystal Tools, and they start work on trying to create Versus 13, they realized that the Crystal Tools engine was so specifically tooled for 13 that it was functionally useless for Versus.
Yeah. I didn't realise, despite all of our talk about 13 in our previous episode, I didn't realise just how fractious the actual creation of 13 was until I started researching Versus 13. You're completely right. It was a very rocky road. I think at one point quite later down the line, they ended up yanking loads of people off of the Versus 13 team to work on just regular 13, because it was we need to get this shit done, otherwise there's never going to be another Final Fantasy ever again. Every single time a new Final Fantasy game comes out, it's like, oh god, this could be the end of the company, and then it does like moderately to really, really well, and it's like, oh, Square Enix is saved, and repeat the cycle as necessary, you know.
One of those things with game design. I mean, I'm not someone that's ever designed games, but I know people that have, and obviously I've chatted to people about development of bespoke engines and stuff like that to run your games. It was quite a big thing at the time. We just talked there before about people like developing the graphics and their new sexy tool to be the new thing, the next fresh new thing, you know. Nowadays, obviously, like a lot of people use Unity or Unreal. I know that you still have, you know, there's a lot more to develop and to make your own game. It's not as simple as just off the shelf a lot of the time.
No, there's no press button, game comes out.
But there is, I think there's a little bit more standardization now, or certainly a lot more people in the industry that know how to use those tools and more quickly. Whereas it seems like here is like, let's develop an engine. It's okay, we'll be able to spend our resource and time and money on both projects concurrently, and we'll be able to dip back on one while the main one's going. But it seemed like they underestimated how much long it would take them to develop that first game.
Yeah.
And essentially 13 versus 13 just got to the point where probably just had some guy coming in, turning the lights on and cleaning the desks up maybe, you know, but no one was doing anything with it. All hands to the pump on the first one, you know?
Yeah. And that was the thing. Tetsuya Nomura came out and said at one point, I think slightly later than 2007, functionally, nobody's working on Versus right now because the staff have all been taken off to go work on 13, the mainline game. And Square came out and said, oh no, God, no. It's just when they have the free time, a few people are going, which of course was essentially a confirmation because all the Versus team had was free time. They couldn't start working on the game until 13 was out. And 13 launched very late in 2009. So there was nothing they could do. Of course, they were being taken off the project to work on 13. It was all hands on deck, number one.
Yeah, exactly.
They had already reaffirmed from the very beginning, 13 was the project we need to get out and all resources are going there. Nomura had already said Versus is waiting on 13. So for Square to say it's totally not true, Versus 13's development hasn't been, I think actually the phrasing he used was the development had been paused. And Square said, no, that's ridiculous. Sometimes people who have free time are being taken off the project to work on it. Yeah,
very
because
sly wording.
They have nothing else to be doing. We already know there. You know, it was certainly the first instance of a possible speculation that things between Square management and Nomura were slightly at odds. Because again, I'm not sure. You know, we're not there yet, obviously, in the timeline, but I'm not sure if you guys know that there were rumors that were pretty well substantiated. I won't say fully confirmed because again, leaks are still leaks, but there were rumors further down the line that because of Final Fantasy XIV's disastrous original launch, that the staff were pulled off in 2012 again, because that was another all hands on deck to save this project.
Oh, yeah.
Crystal Tools as well, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I did want to bring up at some point, of the Crystal Tools engine games, the only ones that ever came out on that engine were the 3 Final Fantasy XIII games and the original 1.0 version of Final Fantasy XIV, which later, after it was destroyed, had a completely new engine built for it. Obviously, Versus 13 never came out, and then they created a different engine to run 15.
Didn't they? Wasn't there a Dragon Quest game as well? Aspirationally, I think they wanted to use everything, didn't they? It's what it is. We spend so much money on this thing, let's use it.
Yeah.
You know?
And, you know, to be fair, they tried.
Yeah, but the point is that like they got their money's worth, hopefully, you know. Apparently that came out on Nintendo Switch. What's going on? Oh, never mind.
What trailer was next, then?
Well, before that, let's talk about 2007. What else was going on in 2007?
Oh, God.
So I've not got any of the memes or anything like that, but I've just got the Final Fantasy releases. So there was War of the Lions on PSP, Revenant Wings, Final Fantasy XII on the DS.
Oh, fuck that one out the window.
Yeah. The PSP versions of Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2, the sexy ones. Final Fantasy 4 on DS, your
my
precious.
opus, yep.
And Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, our favourite game.
I take it back. I don't want to go back to the early 2000s now.
And this is where May really likes that game, and we're like... I'm also going to make a special mention, shout out to The World Ends With You, which is also a Square Enix
2007.
game.
Love
2007.
that game.
Yeah, which is obviously Nomura's character design. I believe, I can never remember the person that made the soundtrack, but it is the same as the one that made Crisis Core, so clearly very busy that year.
Yeah.
Takeru Ishimoto, I think his name is.
Fantastic soundtracks. Brilliant game as well, The World Ends With You. Play it on DS if you can. And yes, clearly Nomura was preoccupied creating belts for all those characters, not working on Final Fantasy Versus 13. So does anyone know the Game Developer Choice Game of the Year for that year?
I want to say Final Fantasy IV. I know it's not right, but that's my answer.
Do you think 2007? Do you know, May, at all? I'll put anyone on the spot, just see if anyone knows.
God, 2007. Jesus, I can't even remember what I was doing in 2007. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it in your capable hands, Jack. I have no idea.
Portal was the game.
Oh yeah, that
shit.
tracks.
Yeah.
The cake is a lie.
I still listen to those two ending songs from Portal 1 and Portal 2. They're still bops.
Isn't Steve Merchant in one of them? Oh,
yeah, he's in the second one.
Yeah.
Of course he is, yeah. Good times. Good game, Portal 1. Anyway. Okay, so yeah, that takes us off of 2007, just to frame us there, make us all feel old. The next trailer I've got is it's called the DK...
I know the one, yeah.
Epsilon 3713 Private Party 2008. And apparently that means, I don't know, that all of those initials correspond to the games they were talking about there. So you've got like D is Dissidia, K is Kingdom Hearts, the Sigma is Sigma Harmonics, whatever the fuck that is. There's the Third Birthday, which is 3, which is the third Parasite Eve game. Advent Children Complete, more Denzel, great. And 13 Fabula Nova Crystallis, which
there
I can read.
you go.
It's written down, yes.
See, when I saw this particular trailer, I couldn't place whether it came out in 2008 or 2009. Do you know which one?
Pretty sure it's 2008 because there was a huge rush of Versus content in 2008.
Right.
Like August 2008 to certainly around late summer 2008, and then again in late 2008 we got a lot of interviews and we got like pretty big trailers, because Advent Children Complete's bonus disc was the one when it was released in 2009, which is where we see the full shot of that party scene, but that's, I think, teased in the trailer that they showed at that private event. Just there's a little snippet at the end of it where you just see Noctis walking up the stairs, and then you just see the portrait of this woman in white looking up at this massive painting of who we learn is Etro. But I think, and again, not to correct you, I'm sure you guys have it written down in front of it, there's actually, purely because I've been doing research on this one particular topic of it, there's, I think, a Jump Festa trailer in late 2007. That's the trailer that announces Stella for the first time. Right. And that's specifically why I know. And it's the shot of her and Noctis sort of running at each other, and then they whip out their weapons and they kind of go. Yeah. And that's kind of where the hype about Stella started, which was, oh my God, why the hell is...
Yeah, so it's interesting because obviously I think I can understand why everyone's got confused, because it is obviously... I don't think anyone really knows, because of course a lot of the time, like you say, with speculation, this was a private party, so there's probably a few people that told anecdotes about things that were there. I had a similar thing, just to go on a slight tangent, when I made a video on the release of all the trailers for Final Fantasy VIII, our favourite game. I can't find any first-hand source that the ballroom scene on PS2, which was rendered on PS2 hardware, appeared at E3. There's nothing. I can't find anything, whereas like a lot of people say it was there, but I do know that it appeared at an event earlier in the year, which was like a PlayStation was we sold so many units, and they had a party for it, and then they showed the PS2 and they showed that dance scene. But everyone says it appeared at E3 1999. Probably did, because everything else did, but there's nothing I've seen that says that. So it's what's happened here, I think, is a lot of people have speculated from a private party, have remembered things differently. Like you say, this trailer's, I think it's probably going to be the one we talk about the most in more detail. And it's really interesting, because you just mentioned there that it appeared on the DVD for Final Fantasy VII Advent Children Complete. Not on my one, it doesn't.
Oh,
so
really?
It's one of those ones. Yeah, so one's a Blu-ray, so it could be the ticket, but that's an interesting topic as well. Why would they take off the sneak peek at Versus 13? Probably because it doesn't exist anymore, whereas the sneak peek of 13 is still on there, which is just really, really weird. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, there's probably like 4 or 5 different versions of this thing.
It's Big Square coming together to rewrite our memories.
And I'd imagine a lot of our chat's going to be around Stella and everything like this.
Yeah.
So obviously up until now we've been talking about some staircases and lots of stuff like that. That trailer when Stella and Noctis meet, when he comes up the stairs, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Obviously there's no voiceover, but there's lots of dialogue. It's been translated and stuff like that. This is where there's so much fan conversation, which I'm pretty sure you know about as well, May. I have some comments from the YouTube, which I'm going to say, which I think sum everything up, and I'm going to mention them by name just because it's really cool. So one of the comments is from a guy called Matthew Muir 8884. It says, Stella and Noctis have more chemistry in one conversation on a trailer than Luna and Noctis had in all of Final Fantasy 15. It helps that Noctis and Stella actually interact as adults.
Yeah. Yes. And that's the thing, like, I know, not to kind of kick the vicious hornet's nest that is the Luna versus Stella argument, but that's the huge problem. And the thing about it is, it was entirely preventable to have it that way. You know, we mentioned this beforehand, but Luna Freya in the original release of the game in 2016, she has 13 lines of dialogue with Noctis. Stella in that one scene has 31.
Jesus.
So, and that's entirely on Square. There is exposition between the two of them as adults. That is entirely on Square. That is why people look at the interactions between Noctis and Stella and go, oh, well, hang on. What is there here? And I think as well, and this is something that we see a lot in Final Fantasy games, and that I think a lot of Western gamers particularly interpret in a way that I don't think is correct. There's more of a mutual interest perceived between the two of them than there is between Noctis and Luna. And that's not unusual for Square. You see a lot of the time in the romance plotlines in Square games where the woman in that love sort of relationship, who is the one that has to be the most, or is shown certainly the one who is the most invested, is the nurturer, is the one pursuing this relationship, or is the one sort of waiting until he's done with the main plot, because we would hate to interrupt any of the sort of main stuff that you're getting up to. You know, it's
Jill.
But it's the male character is often shown to be sort of maybe aloof or not sure or not as expressive about it. You know, and sometimes those are for reasons that are into the plot. Like you have Cloud and Tifa. Yeah. Tifa's very actively, you know, nurturing for Cloud, and she's obviously the one that has the most obvious feelings, and Cloud, for plot reasons that are interesting and justifiable, is like, oh, well, I don't really know, and doesn't show it as much. And you have Squall as well, and you have, I would argue, Final Fantasy 16 suffers from the same thing as well. And it's something that happens in 15, I think, definitely. I'm not trying to make this a Luna versus Stella thing, honestly, because I think it's just an argument that's been
done to death at this point. Done to
death. We could fight about it all day. But I think the fact that so many people played that game and came out of it like, I would have loved to see more of a connection, because I finished that game where they were at the end and they were on their thrones together, and I'm going, am I supposed to be moved more by this? I feel like I should be. Whereas had that exposition and had some of that information that's in all these sort of files that you have to read within the game, had that been more exposition, I don't even think we'd be having the Luna versus Stella conversation, obviously. No. And it's entirely on Square that people are still having it. But it's also entirely on Square. This is one of the things I do lay blame for with Tabata, because a large reason that this Luna versus Stella argument has lasted so long and has become sort of a figurehead for the arguments between 15 fans and 13 fans in general is because Tabata several times went, Luna is the better character. Now, this is before the game came out. Luna is the better character. Stella, she actually kind of sucked. And Luna is better. You know, we're confident we have the better character. That came out in Luna Freya's official character description. Says, mentions Stella twice. Unlike Stella Nox Fleuret, Luna Freya is a strong, independent character. And again, because I see people saying this, like, oh, so you don't think just because a woman doesn't fight or doesn't do this and this, that they're not strong and independent. Again, I don't believe that. And I mean, I was saying this to you guys earlier, but my whole problem starts and ends with when you make the main example of a woman's independence, her decision to die to prompt a man to continue on with an adventure. When you make that the main point around which a woman's independence and strength is centered, around her enthusiasm for continuous self-sacrifice in the name of a prophecy and in the name of fulfilling the main character's whole journey, you fundamentally misunderstood the point of why people ever asked for independence in female characters in the first place. Yeah. That's not what it was.
I feel like if there was really a problem with, like, oh, you don't want an independent female character, which is bullshit anyway, but I feel like if that was truly the case, people wouldn't enjoy Aranea and Iris so much, who are both fiercely independent characters. Like
best characters in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got to throw in there as well that, because a very interesting point you made there about a lot of the Final Fantasy couples tend to be the woman's nurturing. The exception I can think of is Final Fantasy IX, where Zidane's chasing after Garnet for most of the game. She's clearly into him, which is why it should have been number one on our list, Mole.
I'm not backing down. You're wrong. Don't try me.
Just throwing it in there.
That was one of the things that I found so, obviously you guys are well aware, I'm a super big fan of 8, but that was one of the things I found so engaging, was that 8's starts off that game with that. And then it has that moment where it totally flips.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Squall is like, this is the love of my life, and I'm going to totally abandon all preconceived notions of duty, and none of that shit actually matters.
Which is so realistic. It's
Yeah.
so realistic. It's amazing. Just to shout out, you're big in Renoa up as well. Obviously,
Oh, thank you very much.
Renoa.
Well, it's so funny because I got so many comments on that video being like, everybody loves Renoa. You've made up that people hate her. And I'm like, no, I didn't.
What?
I was fighting people in GameFAQs forums by the time I was like 17. I know how to call somebody a bitch in 3 different languages because people did not like hearing that Renoa was good at all, actually. But it was funny because I would get comments in being like, you've literally made up that people hate Renoa. Everybody loves her. And then the next comment would be, well, I hate Renault, but I'm going to watch this video and give you a chance to see you make your points. And it would be coming in on top of each other. And I was so tempted to just take a screenshot and be like, guys, you're going to need to duke this out in the comment section.
It's interesting that because, yeah, obviously I've done a lot of soul searching about Renoa, and I was quite indifferent to Renoa for a long time. But actually, like, I've been doing some writing around one of our lists we're coming up with, the DJ Street Prison. That's all done from Renoa. She rescues you. Without her, that wouldn't happen. And it's all because of her kind of like more chaotic, non-structured by a military perspective on stuff. And essentially, if you look at that, Squall's next move where he goes back to Garden is all like that. She's rubbed off on him as a person, regardless of the romantic chemistry there, which is something I hadn't really noticed before. Renoa is actually like fundamental to that game, where she doesn't get the credit for. Because she's understated, which is, good writing.
I think the funny thing with Renoa is when people talk about Squall and they say, like, Squall's whole thing, he's just very realistic for a teenage boy. And
not enough dick jokes.
Yeah. But for me, I think Renoa is so realistic of a teenage girl with the life experience that she would have had.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely get why at the beginning it's kind of jarring. You're on this sort of mission and this colonial sort of structure. And then you go into this very well decorated, lavish room. And she's like, oh, hey, you've woke me up. We're going to go down and like overthrow the government. And you're like, what? But for me, when I played 8 the first time, I remember everything about playing 8 the first time because I remember the first time I heard Balam Garden theme being like, oh, this is going to be the most special thing I've ever done in my entire life. But I remember that scene where they're first in the district prison and being like, you guys really did not thank Renoa enough for this for my liking, because I felt like it was such a good show of her character that she's like, guys, can you believe my father tried to use his privilege to bust me out of prison and leave you guys in here? Can you believe he thought I wouldn't come back and break you guys out with my privilege? And you're like, yeah, it never occurs to her that other people don't see her the way she sees herself. They just see her with her father's influence and her father's privilege. She's baffled that her dad would break her out and not break out her friends. She's baffled that they wouldn't expect her to go back and break them out.
Caraway's such a dick, isn't he?
Oh, God, such a dick.
I mean, it's interesting because this does tie in with what we're talking about with Stella as well really well, because Renoa takes the role there of essentially that you use Zidane and Dagger as an argument there. She's like influencing everyone to change their ways. It's good writing. And I think for me, just to sort of bring it back to Stella and stuff like that, my perception of this based off of the video is that it seems to be that based off the dialogue and that fighting part with Stella, that they were supposed to be like 2 sides of the same coin and very much the same. Obviously, it seems like the game would be from Noctis's perspective, or unnamed dark-haired Final Fantasy protagonist at the time, with her being kind of like the yin and yang thing going on there, which is kind of something that they did do in Final Fantasy IX. So I've made the argument before that realistically Zidane and Dagger both are the main character in that game. You could argue Vivi maybe as well, but to me, either of them could be the main character there. It feels like maybe they were going for this avenue with Versus 13, which would have been so exciting, and we didn't get that with 15. We got Luna Freya's the objective.
I think ultimately, from what I could glean, the plot for Versus 13 overall, which was in no form or shape finalized or even announced at this point in the trailer life cycle, was that the crystal that's in Insomnia, Niflheim were trying to steal, and it was the only crystal left in the world, and it was probably like, this is the basis of life and creation or some shit, I don't know. But obviously Noctis wants to keep it in his family line, and from what I could glean, it seemed like Stella also wanted the crystal for Tenebrae, so it definitely felt like it was going to be either either side could be right or wrong, and you'd only really find out the more you played, with both of them believing that they were in the right. And that first conversation with Noctis and Stella, I think the reason why it's persisted and still looked on with so like, oh, Stella's a good character and they had so much chemistry, is not just that they actually have an adult conversation, but the only things that we really learn about Luna in 15 is like, okay, she's a healer and, you know, deposed princess of Tenebrae, but also she's betrothed to Noctis. And that's it. And it's the betrothed to Noctis that gets the focus. It's all the boys really talk about. They don't talk about, like, her prowess at healing. They don't talk about her oracle duties. Nothing like that. It's just, oh, you're gonna get married to Luna Freya. That's cool. And Noctis is like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Meanwhile, you know, unnamed protagonist and Stella have a conversation about how, oh, I can see a shooting star. What is that? Oh, it's the souls of the dead. You must have had something happen to you in your childhood too. And they're able to bond over that. And you actually see them have a real conversation, which is predicated on something that actually piques your interest as someone who goes into it expecting some kind of like fantasy thing. Sure, I don't mind the modern games, actually. I have absolutely nothing against the modern style of games, but it's still nice to have something a little extra like, oh, I can see the souls of the dead. Like, really? And why is that instead of, I'm engaged to be married? I fucking know Joe Blow down the street's engaged to be married. That's not special.
Yeah, and I think for me, again, doing all the research for this video, you really go back and forth on what people say is true, and you have to kind of look it up yourself. But from what I have been able to look up, people were really, really annoyed before the game released with the scrapping of Stella, because their whole argument was there's going to be no women in this party. There's no playable female character. And Tabata came out at the time, and this was correct, where he said, you're not going to get me on that one. No. That was Namor's original vision. He was always intending to be an all-male party. No, you're not going to get me with that one. And that's correct, because as far back as 2008, Namor was in interviews saying, there's things that guys can only say among guys that can't say around
and
girls.
They don't do any of that in the fucking game.
No.
It's such a...
That karma stink. I said it last
Honest
time.
God, it's just, you know, Link's body spray and Dream is keeping that car together. But as far back as 2008, Namor was talking about the boys when they get together, and they could be doing something like teasing Noctis about Stella, which we eventually see Prompto doing about Luna. And the whole thing about the Luna-Stella argument is that it has sort of created this false revisionism of history that Luna and Stella were functionally going to be the same character, or that the Stella that we see in that trailer is kind of dead after that, or she was just a concept or just vibes. But that goes against everything that Tabata and Square Enix themselves would say for the foreseeable future about the game. So, you know, Luna Freya not being a playable character is something that Stella likely would not, depending on which sort of leaks you believe, Stella probably would not have been a party member. So that was never going to happen. That, you know, people have brought that up about Luna being like, oh, well, you know, you couldn't play Luna. You probably couldn't have played Stella. Again, like you guys were saying, that there's a conversation between them about something that they're both on an equal footing with. There's the decision to make Luna Freya 4 years older than Noctis, so that she could specifically be this person with a huge responsibility and a mentorship role for him, particularly when they're children, when they meet, and she's trying to teach him about this prophecy that she already knows about and his destiny and stuff, to then be like, oh yeah, they meet once as adults and she's immediately killed. What do you mean you don't believe in the romance between them? What do you mean? We just saw them as children in flashbacks, and she's a guiding, mentoring force because she's old. And that was a decision Tabata made. You can read all the interviews where Tabata says, you know, it was a decision when we decided she was going to have this huge responsibility to make her older than Noctis. So it kind of sets up immediately that Luna and Noctis, Luna is a mentoring role for him as a child. Then they meet once as adults. We see them interact back and forth in their messages. But again, the only time we see them in exposition on the screen is this sort of mentor-mentee relationship. Whereas Mal, as you were saying, Stella and Noctis, they're not on equal platforms. I think Noctis has kind of a higher status as he's a prince.
Yeah.
But they're both of the same age. They've both had this shared experience. They're both high in the royal societies in their countries.
The way they speak to each other in that trailer too is very on equal terms.
It's realistic tension, isn't it? I mean, obviously, I think I mentioned in our 15 video about how in 15 there seems to be this underlying, you just said there, I think you put it more nurturing with all the female characters. I think I made a very mummy vibe throughout the game. All of the characters, with maybe the exception of Iris, have that kind of like, come on boys, let's go thing going on, which is a bit interesting. Obviously, there's not much female characters in that game at all, really. But it's interesting to see that sort of, I don't know whether because we don't really know, I guess, that whether there would have been necessarily a romantic thing between Stella and Noctis.
Well, yeah.
Okay,
We're about
right.
to be schooled, aren't we?
Sorry, now it's a huge point of contention for me, actually,
Right.
because so many people have argued based on scans from a magazine that nobody can actually seem to source or say what magazine it was, but it scans from a magazine. If I was a guessing woman, because the magazine also contains bits about Dissidia, possibly from that private Square Enix event, possibly some sort of promotional thing. But in an interview, Tetsuya Nomura says, in terms of the romance between Stella and Noctis, I want to do something difficult. And then he goes on to say, the story of Versus 13 isn't about their romance, but more about what it says about them as humans and about the world in general. And people read that and went, oh yeah, well, Stella and Noctis were always going to be platonic. That's not what he said.
That's absolutely not.
That's not what he said. He said the whole thing about the story isn't going to be around their romance. And their romance is going to be more about what it brings out in each other and in the world around them. You can't make a comment about doing something difficult with the romance in the game without having our romance in the first place.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah,
you know?
I think, honestly, the biggest argument that I think there probably would have been a romance, even if I didn't have all of this hindsight knowledge and, you know, hadn't played 15 and everything like that, is that having a romance in Final Fantasy games has kind of become de jure. That's just what you do. I think the only real exceptions that I can think of is the 13 trilogy and 12, and arguably it's because the protagonistic role in 12 is definitely taken up by Vaan, but like very arguably it's Ashelia who's actually the main character of 12.
Yeah,
so
her boyfriend's dead.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can't help but feel like because it's a female character in quote unquote the leading role, sorry Balthier, there's no romance in those games because of that. But then you look at all, like, not every single game, because the romance wasn't integral until, I want to say, 8. 6 and 7 are definitely on the cusp of it, but it isn't the main focus. And in 6 and 7, you can definitely choose not to see it. But in all of the others where there is a romance, it's very in your face. It's very, you cannot ignore that Squall and Rinoa become a couple by the end of it. You cannot ignore that Yuna and Tidus are together, that Garnet and Dan aren't together. Like, this is just something that happens in a Final Fantasy game now, and it's what we all have come to expect.
It's for the song. It's just for the song. That's what we want.
Yeah, but the songs slap.
Yeah, they do. That's what I mean. They had to put it in.
So, like, you know, even before they announced anything other than about FF16, you take one look at Clive, you take one look at Jill, you go, you know where this is going to end. Like, this is just a foregone conclusion, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Final Fantasy has never been first and foremost about the romance. So, like, you know, to see these trailers and to look at Noctis and Stella and see they're completely diametrically opposed in their terms of design. It doesn't get clearer than that in a fucking Final Fantasy game where, sure, romance isn't necessarily the norm, but it is there, and people arguing that they're platonic. Oh my god.
I think it's just wishful thinking, actually, from a lot of people who'd like to use that in an argument, which I think is a poor basis for examining anything about any piece of media, is that, well, I want it to be true because it'll help me win an argument with a guy on like a gaming forum, and so that's probably what I'm going to make true.
Yeah, I wanted FF15 to be good, but, you know, here we are.
Those 2 chapters where you play with Aranea and Iris are amazing. Best part of the game.
Yeah. But actually, like, Mal, I'm so glad you said that, because I have the exact same thing about why there's no romance, particularly for me in 13, because as you said with 12, it's gone back to sort of that like several different protagonists thing. Yeah. But 13 has the traditional, well, certainly for that point in the sort of history of the Final Fantasy games, has the traditional, this is the gal, this is the hero of the story. And I think definitely for me, it is so telling of what Square Enix's vision of what romance in their JRPGs is.
Yeah.
That they do not give. The one time they have a definitive leading heroine is the one time that there's no...
Explicitly no romance with
the lead. And I think that's one, because it's very obvious that they consider the romance plot lines to be either rewards for the good behavior of the protagonist.
Interesting.
As in, it's something that they get to have at the end of their journey.
The hero's journey, yeah.
Yeah, it's some sort of emotional fulfillment. But also, and this is going to be quite controversial, but it's very clear that Square see that role of love interest as sort of the supplementary role.
It's a passive role. The love interest is passive versus the hero, who is a man, is the one who makes And I know I know you already said that you do not want to talk about Lightning Returns, and Jack hasn't played Lightning Returns. I'm going to bully him into that in his own time.
Shining Returns, yeah.
For posterity's sake, before we ever get around to that episode, I experienced Lightning Returns. Let's just put it like that. I think there are good parts and I think there are bad parts about it. And this is something that was lost in the English version, and this is something that we'll talk about at a much later date. But there is the hint of, and I don't want to say a romance, but some kind of romantic-esque subplot right towards the very end. And it is directed at Lightning. It's not directed from Lightning. So again, even in that situation, it's not the same as the male characters. So yeah, no, you're completely 100% agree with you.
Yeah, but I think it also comes down to as well, certainly for Lightning in 13, Square Enix were never going to be brave enough to give Lightning the female love interest she probably would have had if we looked at the chemistry between the characters.
They kept calling Fang and Vanille fucking sisters, for God's sakes. They were never going to be brave enough.
They're best friends. They're cousins. They're best.
That's a bit of oh my God, Sailor Moon, wasn't it? They're cousins.
Yeah. So they're cousins who share a bed, but that's just what we do here in USA. So Square were never going to give her a female love interest. They were never going to. In 2009, no, they were never going to give her that. No. But I think it's very telling that they did not think that she could be a successful lead of a game with a love interest, because the role that they envision women to have in their love stories is not one where you can be fully formed as a character, because you have to sort of be giving to, we can see it play out in the other dynamics and stuff, but as well they were like, oh well, we can't have a man doing the stuff that like Renoa and Tifa and Yuna are doing.
And as a disclaimer as well, I think 13 works best because there is no romance in it.
Oh totally, absolutely.
I don't think that Lightning would have benefited from a love interest, but it is very telling that it is the only game of the modern generation, MMOs and 12 on its weird rocky ground aside, it's the only one of the modern iterations of the games that doesn't include one.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, I totally agree. I don't think Lightning needs one. I think Lightning is better off having one. I don't think any female character needs a love interest to be good or interesting at all. But again, like you said, it's just telling that it's
the only one.
The only one since, I don't think Final Fantasy V really, I think they tried in some of the later promotional stuff about it to be like, oh, Bartz and Lena, they're a girl and a boy. You guys, what do you think? You want to throw them together?
And even technically then, 5's the outlier because 4 was all about it, so...
Yeah, and it's not that it was ever a huge part of it, like you were saying, until probably 8, 9, 10. And then even again, 10's, depending on which ending you picked in 10 too, but 10's ending, it's a tragedy. It's this... you never forget how you feel the first time you see that or you play as that. It rips something from you. I think 10 is a really good example of what Nomura was saying in that interview where he said, the game, it's about what their relationship says about the world and says about humanity. It's not, even though 10's probably is a game about their love story more than maybe 13's would have been, but it's more about what that brings out in themselves and says about the world. So it's not that there's no precedence for that having happened in Final Fantasy. It was a huge success in Final Fantasy X. 10 is arguably
one of the most beloved in the entire series, I'd say.
Unquestionably.
I think structurally as well, it's really good,
If it's not number 1, I'd say it's probably in the top 3, just generally most loved,
Yeah. People saying that it's platonic wouldn't have been anything wrong with it if it was platonic. It would have been interesting, and there would have been an interesting way to flesh that out. I think it would have been fun to see, but
the likelihood of that actually happening was closer to 0 than they probably would have wished.
Because, like you were saying, just not the Square Enix formula with this sort of thing.
No.
And I can't even remember how we got on that tangent either.
No, it's good stuff. It's really interesting. It's interesting having a discussion around something that we still didn't really necessarily get confirmed. It's interesting that you said there, May, about how people make it their entire personalities on forums to argue a certain point because of the way they wanted things to be. And of course, I think I mentioned earlier that, a game like this that doesn't really exist, people can, look at the problems they've got with 15 and say that, 13 versus wouldn't have had any of those problems. It would have been the perfect game.
That's exactly what I've seen,
kind of romanticizing it, really, because considering the fact we talked about 13 here, and of course I've been converted, I quite like 13.
Yes.
But, apart from its dodgy progression mechanics, as a story and as a character piece, it's fantastic. But it's still a pretty rocky game. I think if you look at it as a game's sort of critique, there are problems with it. So considering the fact that Versus 13 probably would have had a lot of the same problems, I'd imagine anyway,
Yeah.
even if we'd had the original Nomura Vision as well. So just a little bit more on the trailer from 2008, which was the one with Stella and everything like that. It's interesting because this trailer that I've got here is, I would say, this is the video editing nerd coming out of me. It's got the same style as the opening in Final Fantasy VIII, which is the overture, where you've got pictures, the black and white pictures of the seeds, and then it comes in with the credits on the black background. It's the same that's used in the Bouncer, where
Really?
effectively the opening to the Bouncer has like cut scenes of the characters, and then it has the same thing with exactly the same setting with the people working on the game. This trailer has that as well, which I thought was quite interesting because both of those games were heavily influenced by Tetsuya Nomura. It'd be interesting to see whether that was his style. Probably was. Really interesting. If you look at the openings to the Bouncer and the overture in FF8 and this trailer back to back, you will see that pattern. It really vibes with me. I love that kind of like show you something, picture of the people involved with it. It's a really good way of bringing you in. I think,
that's cool.
Anyway. And I think that's I'd argue, this is just the nerd in me talking in Final Fantasy VIII, that I think that's the better intro.
I've always really loved that. It's a really good song as well. I've never understood, like, you know, we shit rightfully so on 10's Prelude because it's fucking bad. But, you know, we've become accustomed to the arpeggio notes for the Prelude. And it's fine. It's good. Don't get me wrong. But FF8's Overture is fucking brilliant as a piece of music.
It'll be interesting to see what you think of that, May, just because you're a Final Fantasy VIII stan.
Oh, well, Final Fantasy VIII can do very little wrong in my eyes. So, I do. I think, because again, Final Fantasy VIII was the first Final Fantasy game I ever played. So for me, that overture has such a special place that I'm like, oh, it's just top tier, you know? Gets
me every time, that particular. Mind you, seeing Livery Fatale live is an experience as well. They're all good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's one thing everyone criticizes Final Fantasy VIII, but no one's ever dunked on the soundtrack.
No,
because the soundtrack's fucking top tier is why.
It is top tier. But that's just to bring Final Fantasy VIII in it, like over at least that. A couple more comments I got from YouTube, which are around this trailer, which is one from Alastor999. It says a lot about Tabata's storytelling skill, the lack thereof, that is, that Stella has far more chemistry with Noctis in this one prototype scene than he did with Luna in the entire game. We've talked about that quite a lot.
Yeah, and again, I don't know that that's Tabata's storytelling skill so much as it is the strange relationship that game has with Luna Freya, who they hyped up extremely. I mean, if you read the interviews, especially with like the art director Yusuke Naora, he was saying the way that we designed her facial expressions and her hair was all to depict that she was this great female character who had, you know, strong will, and she was principled and she was well brought up and everything. So a huge amount of development went into making the character look like that, and then it was just left out of the important parts of the story. So it's a strange one. It's a strange relationship the game has with Luna. I'm not even sure it's Tabata's storytelling. It's Tabata's...
No. That's the thing. All I could think of when you said that was we then come back to something, and I think this is something that we discussed when we last had you on, May, as well. It comes back to like what I call the Kojima effect of one person is the face of the development cycle and they're responsible for everything, and that is not the case. Sure, Nomura, you know, this might have started as his idea, but I guarantee you Nomura wasn't the only person that was working on the script, even if he had a heavy hand in it. Tabata was producer, director? He's not credited as a writing person in his roles, is he? Like, this isn't Tabata's story. He simply oversaw what someone else was doing, and by all accounts, by the time Tabata was brought on, it was like, yeah, it looks fine, there's no spelling mistakes, get it out the door, just want it gone, like, I've got other shit to be doing with my life. And, you know, again, this isn't just relegated to Final Fantasy. Yoko Taro isn't the only person important in the Nier franchise. Kojima's not the only person who is important in the Metal Gear franchise. Like, you could do this for any game. Someone who is a single face is not the sole person behind it, and it's a very disingenuous statement to make. I completely get where that comment is coming from, and I'm not in any way, shape or form defending the dilution of what Stella's character became, shall we say, but it's not all Tabata's fault. Don't get me wrong, I want to fight Tabata in an empty car park somewhere at maybe like 3 a.m. for many, many things, but the writing is not necessarily one of them.
Yeah, I mean, the team that got 15 out, it has to be said, produced a miracle.
Yeah, they did their best with absolute dog shit.
And I think often when people have discussions about that game of like, God, I just hope they gave them like a year's paid
Yeah, totally.
Holiday.
This is Square Enix, so they didn't.
So no, they didn't. They gave them like a half-price lunch coupon or something and went, all right,
Distant Worlds t-shirt doesn't fit, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like the funny thing about like you were saying, like the figurehead of a game, like particularly with this game, with the two sort of giant personalities and figureheads of it, like the director does have to oversee all the decisions and make all the decisions. And there is some level of responsibility to be taken for sure. But we know how serious the meddling was from upper management in Square Enix. And that can't ever be discounted with either of them. And I find a lot of Tabata's decisions that he stood by or stood over, people are more willing to go, oh, well, the mess of that game that he came on, or Square meddling. Whereas people have this impression that Tetsuya Nomura is a bit of this like omnipotent evil of all times.
Darth Nomura strikes again.
Nomura was under large constraints as well, and people go, no, it was his stupid evil dictator mind that was making them all do this, and he was changing it. Those aren't the facts either. There was meddling for both of them, and there was huge pressure for both. I'd argue Tabata in particular had huge time pressure.
Oh yeah, I mean, you even see it nowadays with the 7 remake project as well. Like, oh, it's shit because it's changed because Nomura changed it. Like, okay, well, number one, he's not the scenario writer. That's Kazushige Nojima, not Nomura, so I don't know where you're fucking pulling that one from. But also, there are so many other people working on this, and also management decided that they finally wanted to do this. It's not just one man's fault.
And Nomura didn't even want to change it. Nomura, if you read some of the interviews from I think it's the Ultimanias, Nomura's like, yeah, I kind of thought we should do like a faithful recreation. That was not his idea. And people have just this perception of like, well, if it's convoluted and it's strange and it takes a long time.
It's definitely Nomura's fault. Mr. Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah. But look, Nomura's not helping himself with the current...
No, he's not.
Kingdom Hearts, the way he's not...
Like, he's not entirely to blame, but he's also not completely free of it, so...
There's huge speculation on the Kingdom Hearts side. I don't know if you guys are aware of like why this is taking so long. It's because of a supplementary game called Missing Link that was supposed to be sort of a Kingdom Hearts Pokemon Go with a GPS function.
Oh my god.
That was, you could supposedly play it offline and also attach it to like
Square Enix producing a mobile offline game. That's a good one.
Yeah, and I mean their mobile division right now is pretty shot. So that's, I think, a lot of the reason why. And again, so there's these other things that are happening that are causing these delays. But yeah, like you said, scapegoating one entire person, even a director, when we know how much of the stuff going on in the background.
And Square Enix, let's not like kid around. None of us are privy to the stuff that goes on behind closed doors.
No, not at all.
It's very, very obvious that they are continually doing things, which, fair play to them.
I think if he'd just put another couple of belt buckles on to Stella, it would have been fine.
It would have saved her life.
Yeah.
She just had 2 more zips.
2 more zips would have done it, and a belt buckle on her head. Right. And the final quote, I'm just going to end on this as a comic one, because the point I'm making with these comments is that like they just say, a lot of the feelings around stuff. Is from J_Kundi. Square not sticking to FF Versus will go down as the biggest fuck up in FF history, which did make me laugh.
And then they did Final Fantasy XIV Legacy version, so...
Yeah, no, it definitely won't.
That comment might have been out of date by now, because,
yeah, I have full faith that they will fuck up better and brighter and stronger in the future.
Bring on 17.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Bring on Final Fantasy VII Reloaded.
Oh, God.
I hope it's reloaded.
It would be amazing.
I would be obsessed. I
mean, that's good romance writing. Trinity and Neo, there we go. They're
there
balanced.
There we go. Yeah,
that's what we want.
Totally.
Just an excuse for me to bring the Matrix up.
Thing is, guys, I think you're both wrong. I think it has to be Final Fantasy VII Refund at this point. Tush.
One last thing. Do we know what the 2008 GDC Choice Game of the Year was in 2008? I said 2008 3 times there. 2008. Do we know what it was?
No.
Fallout 3.
Oh, really? There wasn't anything better?
Was.
I mean, 3 was good, but, like, it's no New Vegas.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm angering an entirely different side of the fan base now. That takes us up to a great place to have a little break, so we'll recollect our thoughts, take a deep breath, and then come back and all yell some more.
See you in a bit. Okay, so we're back after that interesting break. We're going to talk more about the absolute clusterfuck that is Final Fantasy Versus 13. Ooh. So what we're going to speak about next, we've kind of got to 2008, 2009, and I know there's a gameplay reveal coming at some point of what originally was going to be the game, but I don't know when that came out. I could not find at what point it actually came out. Someone said 2009, someone said 2010.
Yeah, so this is kind of where things start to get... You'd think that with the advent of time, things would start being a little easier to document, but it's like really not the fucking case with this game.
Got worse.
I think that gameplay footage that you're talking about, that came out in 2009 for Tokyo Game Show.
Of course.
And my note that I've written down on this is that it was a demo clip that was created to prove that the game was still in development and not just abandoned after they hadn't said anything for a year. So, you know, we're already starting off on a very strong foot. And of course, later on that same year, Final Fantasy XIII released. That was in December in Japan, and then it didn't come out for North America or for Europe until March in 2010. So at the very least, you know, Crystal Tools has obviously been finished and the game has been made. So finally, at long last, they can stop having free time and get back to doing their jobs. Right, guys? Right, guys?
Like what you were saying about the difficulty in finding information about Versus, like, if I'm right, I think that gameplay trailer was shown behind closed doors to a selection of journalists, which is why it's maybe hard to find out the timing of when the gameplay trailer came out, because I think it originally was just shown to journalists to be told, see?
We're still working on it.
Yeah, you can create some mystery around this for us, please.
Yeah.
There is a video gameplay video. I have played it, but trust me, like,
Yeah, and then, I mean, Final Fantasy XIII's Japanese release, 2009, and then they're like, oh, well, Versus, here you go. Only to find out that, of course, the Crystal Tools is really not compatible.
Yeah, which was a surprise because they put enough work into making a new engine, and then all of a sudden, oh, it's busted, we gotta make a new engine.
Yeah, and it was just that it was so based around 13 that it just was so non-functional for what Versus 13 was supposed to be, and for its own game and for its own world, that it became quite functionally useless. Then on the bright side, in 2010, what we hear for the first time is both Nomura and Kitase saying, well, the scenario's finished and all the character designs are definite and all the clothing designs are definite from Rowan. So,
yeah, that's right, because they actually got a fashion designer studio to come in and like create the clothes for all the guys, didn't they? So that outfit that we associate with original Noctis, with like the high collar and it's very Uchiha Sasuke, actually.
Yes.
The white shirt that Gladio's still wearing, I think it's a white shirt in that scene where you actually see the boys for the first time, and that was actually Nomura's own design because they hadn't finalized the outfit choices yet. So Nomura was like, shit, I'm a character artist, I'll just whip this up, and that's what they used as a placeholder, and it was only ever going to be a placeholder, which I didn't know until like last week, so that was cool.
Yeah,
no zips though.
No zips.
Yeah. Yeah, are we sure? And I know like people kind of go, oh yeah, this scenario was totally finished in 2010. Yeah, pull the other one. But we do have some kind of insider information that there was a finished script in 2011 at least, because we know one of the character designers, an Italian man, Roberto Ferrari, famous for his Facebook post in 2016, he joined the project in May 2010 as a character designer. And he himself said he worked perfectly fine. There was no trouble at all from 2010 until the end of 2011, because then in 2012, the staff was cut down from 200 to 20.
See, the quote that I've actually got here from Ferrari, and this quote, I believe, is from 2016. I can't remember what source it's from, but this is a direct quote. I've actually got it in quotation marks here, because he was asked specifically about, I think it was Gentiana, and he says, I had no story or design planned for Gentiana, but I can confirm to you that the writers changed the script I received in 2011. The story kept changing every 3 months, and the definitive delivery date for the game was for the end of 2014, which, and you're completely right, the staff eventually was cut down from 200 to around 20-ish, and that was late 2012. So by all accounts, and I also didn't realize that Ferrari wasn't there for the entire duration. I thought that he was like a permanent fixture, and apparently he was only there for like a few months to a year maybe. It's just like the people that worked on this game, the things that they say, it's like you said earlier, I don't know who to believe at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So much of the information from the official sources contradict each other. Tabata said the first thing he did when he joined the project was put a deadline of 2016 because a deadline hadn't been reached. Ferrari said the original deadline was for 2014. It's
just a mess.
It is. And I mean, even like people take Ferrari's Facebook post to use as a dig against Nomura, like how terrible the conditions were under Nomura, that Nomura was changing the script so often. There are other translations of that post in which it's made more clear. And I don't speak Italian, so I couldn't confirm or deny the accuracy of it. But Other translations of it suggest that when Ferrari said the script kept changing, he was specifically referring to 2013. And again, what to remember about Ferrari is, in his own words on that post, left the project in December 2013 to follow Namara. And I've never seen anybody else talk about this. I found one person talk about this and show a screenshot where he said it. But in the comments replying to people, Ferrari said, according to these screenshots of it that I've seen, that he also left because he had what he said was a misunderstanding with the art director, Yusuke Naora, about the direction that the game was going in.
Right.
And he does another interview with an Italian gaming magazine that same year where he said his most favorite game that he's worked on is 15 because he got to work with Tetsuya Nomura and he really admired the creative freedom that Nomura had given it. So it's likely that Ferrari's frustrations with the game are more so to do with it changing to 15 and it being put down into this more condensed story. But I see most people talking about that to be like, see how disorganized and bad Nomura was. But I don't feel like that was what Ferrari was trying to say, because Ferrari left the project to continue to work with Nomura, who he very clearly admires.
Yeah.
I think it's a great example of cherry picking things.
And willfully believing only certain parts of,
Exactly. But yeah, that's
that's interesting. And the notes that I've got here, it seems like 2010 and 2011 were kind of really confusing years anyway. I mean, right at the very beginning, you've got, all of a sudden you have Jump Fiesta, at which Noctis's new outfit, which is what we finally ended up getting for him, was actually put on display. And apparently the character modelers, when they were actually creating the characters within the game, they actually had the character outfits created and placed within the offices to refer to, because it was just easier to have an actual outfit there that they could look at, which is really cool, I thought. So, we got to see Noctis's new outfit, like it's definitely carrying on, but then, Crystal Tools isn't powerful enough, and we have to make a new engine, and then Nomura says, well, we're not sure whether or not we'll show Versus 13 at E3 this year, and then it doesn't show at all, and then halfway through the year, we get new in-game screenshots and we get some more details, and then we're told all the character designs are done and the scenario's finished and voice casting's beginning, and then like a month later Kitase says, well, it might not be released until after next year, and then a 30-second trailer leaks, and then Square Enix actually released the trailer properly, and then 2010 ends, and it's like, well, that was a fucking clusterfuck of a year. Like, what in Christ's name was going on?
So many question marks around 2009 and 2010 here. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on at either of them.
And then 2011 rolls around, and that's good. We're like, right, okay, they've said maybe after this year the game will come out, but maybe not. We get to hear the boys' voices for the first time, because they had actually done casting. That was cool, because, at this point it's been 5 years since that initial trailer, so woo, we've got voices at long last. And then in summer, the PS4 and the Xbox One are like, oh yeah, these are coming out, so they have to change their development. Sure, the engine was already being changed at this point into the Luminous Studio engine, which, by the way, has only ever been used for Final Fantasy 15 and for Forspoken, which came out 2 years ago. Those are the only two games.
That's weird. I saw you write that, and that is bizarre. I've got that on my shelf. And I've not played it yet, but like, wow, they left it and just haven't touched it again for like 3 or 4 years. Fuck it, let's get our money's worth.
It's ridiculous. It's like they did nothing with it for 7 years, and then all of a sudden they create this new thing. Like, oh shit, there's this software that we might as well use.
Yeah, we've spent millions on. Let's just use it.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And in July of 2011, Nomura comes out and says, Versus 13 hasn't entered full production, and we will not be showing this at Tokyo Game Show 2011. And then the next month they renew the trademark, and it's like, so
what on earth is happening?
And then I couldn't find anything else that really happened in 2011. The fact that they've said we've finished all of this like really important stuff, but we haven't actually started production properly, and we're not going to show you anything more, and then just silence until July of 2012, when the president, Yoichi Wada, says that the rumours of cancellation aren't true. And like you said, at this point Nomura's probably like, it's on a pause, and Wada's like, you shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. And meanwhile, I've got it here. July, the president says the cancellations aren't true. October, Nomura says it's still in development, please wait. None of us know what's going on at this point. I think it's probably around this time, maybe earlier, but development has now officially changed to be on the PS4 and the Xbox One. So it's all next-gen consoles now, and internally at this point, Versus 13 has been rebranded. The general public won't know this for a few months minimum yet, but they've already decided at this point. This is when they axe most of the team from about 200 to about 20, and this is also about the time that they're bringing Tabata on. Now, Tabata... I had long stopped giving a shit about Versus 13 and 15 at this point. Like, I remember seeing the trailer when they'd officially rebranded and being like, huh, that's weird. And then at that point, like, it had gone on for so long that I just wasn't interested in following it anymore. I knew I wasn't going to get a next-gen console just to play this one game, which, by my estimations, probably wasn't going to do too good or be really what I was interested in, because, like, I didn't want to follow 4 dudes on a fucking bro journey. And the fact that I finally...
Oh, how wrong you were.
Yeah, after so many years, I was dragged kicking and screaming into the world of Eos, and I finally learned what actually happens in that game. I'm not forgiving my friends for it. But, like, you know, I had long stopped paying attention, so I didn't know that Tabata became co-director alongside Nomura for a time, and eventually transitioned into becoming full director. So, like, they were working together. God, I can only imagine what that handover must have been like.
I think people forget because it's been so long, and because it's, you know, the 2 camps, the verse 13, the 15 camps are so kind of at each other's throats. Both of those men had a very good working relationship.
Yeah.
Like, they had worked together on, I do think it was Crisis Core.
Yeah.
Both of them had worked together on Crisis Core. They'd worked together on the third party, which I don't love, but they worked together on that game. And for what would become Type 0, Nomura did help out with that as well. So they had a good working relationship. And now I haven't been able to confirm this because I cannot find a copy of it anywhere. But apparently in the Crisis Core Ultimania, Tabata and Nomura are talking about how Nomura, like, took him under his wing, and how he's like, this guy Tabata, like, you guys watch out for him, he's a really cool dude and you'll love his style of work, you know. So they had a very good working relationship, and you can see that even when Nomura's like, oh, here's my co-director, you guys will love him, like, everything's gonna go great.
Yeah, there's no bad blood there.
No. Something happens between June 2013 and November 2013. I know I haven't gotten to 2013 yet, but the difference in Nomura's public statements between E3 2013 and November 2013, and then eventually we know full official takeover is December 2013. Something happens in between there, and I obviously don't know their business, but, you know, a lot of people are like, it's just the fandoms that are fighting, it's not the two. And I don't know whether they're fighting per se, but I just don't think that is
the entire truth.
Yeah, I don't think that relationship is still maybe as solid as it would have been at the start of the project, but something happens.
I know there was one quote that I was able to find, I think it might have come from the FF Wiki, but I've got here that Tabata has said that when Final Fantasy Versus 13 became Final Fantasy 15, it was only around 25% complete, which is just painful.
Yeah.
So, and obviously then the next year, 2013, the official rebrand came at E3, and Versus 13 was officially thrown into the wind, and we never heard about it again, except from all of the fans who never shut the fuck up about it. But, you know, fair enough, they'd been waiting.
Like us right now.
Like us right now. But there was one interesting post that I actually found on a forum from around 8 years ago. So yeah, around the time that the handover was happening. There's one person going, look, it hasn't been 10 years since this game has been in development. In 2006, it was announced. In 2013, it was rebranded, and in 2016, 15 was released. Scrapped ideas and halted development does not stop time continuing to add up. 10 years is 10 years. And, like, I kind of agree with that, and I kind of disagree with that, because on the one hand, yes, the original idea was scrapped, and they just used it as a base, probably quickly rewrote a few things, and by all accounts, they were rewriting things up until the very end. But, like, it was a new thing altogether that they were putting out. If it had been Versus 13 that released in 2016, then yes, that would have been 10 years exactly of development hell, but that's not necessarily the case. It was built on the bones of it, sure. So, like, I'd be really interested to hear if you guys agree with, you know, or what your thoughts are, and if it actually was 10 years of development time, or if it was only 3-ish.
Yeah, my thing is that I think it's a 10-year wait, but it wasn't a 10-year development.
Yeah.
We waited for that game for 10 years. That game was not in development for 10 years.
Yeah.
I think, like you say, I agree and I disagree with that. But I think specifically, again, it's just there's a little bit of revisionism going on where people seem to think that Versus 13 was always going to be the 15 that we got. And everything that everybody working on the 15 version has ever said contradicts that totally. They have always said, we used the bare bones and we built our own stuff. This was all stuff we added in. Now, sometimes I read certain stuff and they seem to be changing that depending on certain things. Like sometimes they say, oh no, we had to keep that in because that was already in the story. And it's like, well, I thought it was only 25% done and you were just building on your own stuff. But it's a complicated enough thing. I'm willing to kind of give a little bit of leeway there. Maybe they are right. I don't know.
I mean, at this point, people being asked probably don't even remember or are eager to forget. So
exactly. Yeah. It's probably sort of like, put that in the back of your head and just keep going on. And particularly as well, I think because in 2012, so much of the staff were cut. So a lot of the people working on that game were not in fact working on that development. They were working on a completely different development. And each game really did get only around 3-ish years. That's something that really bothers me as well, is when people go, oh, well, it only took Tabata 3 years to get done what it took Tetsuya Nomura. No, Tabata had 3 years. He didn't need 3 years. He probably needed 6.
Yeah.
He had 3. That was it. And the fact that a game got out in 3, credit to everybody involved.
Impressive,
It's not that, he could have done it. Clearly, he kind of couldn't have because they needed the royal edition to smooth everything out 2 years later. But it was just that, like Nomura didn't have 10 years. He had functionally 4.
Yeah.
Maybe 4. Most likely 3.5.
It's still amazing. I mean, obviously, like going back to my point earlier about not wanting to dunk on game designers and things taking a long time. I think as time's gone on and games have become HD, they have become more difficult to develop because obviously back in the PlayStation 1 days, we had a new game every year.
It's not that case anymore.
Maybe not even that. So we had Final Fantasy 7 in 97, we had Final Fantasy 8 in 99, and we had Final Fantasy 9 in 2000 because they were developed concurrently, and they're all fully functioning games. They have their flaws. And obviously, I mean, it's pointing on the fact that it might have been easier, quote unquote, to develop for those titles. But of course, now it's like saying around that time, it's going to take 4 years would have been a crazy amount of time. But actually, yeah, it's probably reasonable. But like, I think a lot of the things we're getting at here is that like 10 years of a wait, then if they've had no one sat there actually sort of, for want of a better term, putting pen to paper, and there's just been maybe a Final Fantasy Versus 13 office with like some computers in it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention the older games. They really were coming out like bam, 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 one after the other.
Yeah.
And then you look at the more modern titles and you go, okay, so we had 10 came out in 2001, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then 12 came out in 2006. So, that's still 3-4 years. That's fine.
You had an online game in the middle of it as well.
Yeah. After 12, we had 13, and that came out in 2009, 2010. So again, that's 3-4 years. So that's pretty normal. And then the thing is that because Versus 13 was announced in 2006, you kind of want to go, there was nothing else that happened because we're focused on this one thing, but there were other things that were coming out at the same time. So realistically, the next mainline game was 15. That came out in 2016. That's 6 years after 13. Now, that's still a long development cycle, and I say long like quite disparagingly because that shouldn't, we shouldn't expect things to come out very quickly with ever better graphics. Like, pay people more money for worse graphics and better story. Like, it is what it is. And then after the whole 15 debacle, we then waited 7 years for 16 to come out. We didn't have any of these excuses this time. Granted, after 15, I think the future of Square Enix was, shall we say, uncertain. But they still managed to claw it back. And then from what I understand, nothing has been announced, but there probably is going to be a Final Fantasy 17. But how long in the future are we going to have to wait for this? And I'm not saying that waiting is a bad thing, but it is a really big departure from how the games used to be managed and brought out. And I don't even really think I have a point with this particularly, other than just it is interesting to look at how it was 20 odd years ago to now.
It feels like this game, this development, is what caused that change. And it could be because of the general development cycle of games and technologies as well. Because of course it's not, I think it's the only series that's had this kind of issue where things take longer to produce and stuff like that. I mean, there's been plenty of games that have died off and come back. I mean, completely out of left field, something like Crash Bandicoot, for example.
Yeah.
Had a big gap, and eventually they came back with Crash Bandicoot 4 finally a few years ago to interesting results. But it's just, there's so many moving parts, and there's so much that goes into game design, that so much accident and stuff.
Oh, and I've just realised I've even managed to overlook 14, which is still ongoing as well. There you go. I've tunnel visioned so hard that I've forgotten what I was talking about as I was talking about it.
Well, it's interesting how my take on all of this, right, is that art imitates life, but it's actually life imitates art, because they were making Kingdom Hearts and they went, let's just make life like a Kingdom Hearts plot. You know, it's just like it's in a weird sort of like silly way. It's essentially it's just like what is going on? It's a complete nightmare. I mean, at the end of the day as well, this stuff. I mean, game design compared to say like general design of we talked about clothing or engineering or scientific endeavor. It's a very young industry.
Yeah, so true.
And a lot of this stuff shot forward really quickly. If you look at, people make the comparison, you see the meme every now and then of like, this is what I think Final Fantasy looked like 20 years ago. And it shows a picture of the NES.
That ruined my life when I saw that.
And of course, it makes you feel old, but at the same time, it's like, well, actually, like, these things have progressed so quickly. And even with, like, the online space, like, within the last 5 to 10 years, this stuff has shot forward so quickly. And it's only reasonable that some of this stuff would fall off the rails if something slightly goes wrong or someone's in a bad mood at the wrong time or a director comes in and says the wrong thing or whatever. It's so easy to derail these things. I know it's fascinating, though, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's not really comparable to any other media behind the scenes either. Like, I guarantee you don't get this when you're writing a book. You might have some kind of similarity between a film production, but not at all to the same degree.
I think we've touched upon before, like certainly when we've gone through and analysed all the games, that there are like through points of design and narrative stuff. Obviously, the games are all their own world, but like, for example, we commented on how 5 is a throwback to certain games. There's some similarities between, say, 6 and 7 with the flashbacks and stuff like that. It's understandable those things would happen moving forward. We just mentioned there about how there's a 10-year cycle for this game. Well, actually, there's an element of it that it should be expected that there should be some things coming out of this old concept. But it's really hard to unpick it and work out whether it's this big, long drawn out project is the way it seems to be on the outside, or whether or not that was just something that they hadn't really thought about for a long time. It's just, I don't think we're ever going to know.
Well, yeah, that's the other part. It's, I think, probably the most important part. We can speculate all we want and we can read all of these old forums and stuff, but we weren't working on it. We will never know, and they're clearly not saying mum about it. So, and
it's not like something we mentioned in another episode as a wild card. It's just my excuse to shoehorn in Stargate again, where essentially there was a Stargate game that was produced back when the series was on TV, and it was nearly finished. Some people own like the alpha copies of the game, and they can't release it for legal reasons and licensing and stuff like that. But that game exists and it's there. I've seen people play it online. And it's like, well, wouldn't it be amazing to release it? Eventually, maybe there will be there's certainly an audience for it. Eventually, there may be a big enough audience for it. Something like that feels tangible, and you can go, you know what, I want to be able to play this version of it. But it doesn't look like anything was actually finished.
No.
And to me, from what we're talking about, it looks like there was a lot of illusion on what was ready to play. That open world section was probably a very small part. It's bizarre.
I think also, especially with this game, like in a way that I can't think of any examples to like say this about any other game as well. You say that about, well, we'll never play the finished game. We did. It's called Final Fantasy 15.
Well, true. Yeah.
And, we can talk about, Versus 13 and 15 are two separate entities, and, we want the Versus 13 cut. We want the Nomura cut, but, like, what we got is what we ended up getting, too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put it into words, but I think that, like, a lot of the time with any creative stuff, I mean, we've talked about it when we're writing, I'm sure you feel the same when you write video ideas, May. You'll come up with an idea, and then it might turn into something else. It's part of the creative process that this happens. And I know that, for example, Final Fantasy IX started as a side project that they were making in Hawaii on the Jolly. And then eventually they went, let's make it a mainline game. But at the time, no one was really interested in Final Fantasy IX. 8 had come out. It was a financial success and it was a critical success as well. And then, of course, the next thing people were looking at was the PlayStation 2. So Final Fantasy IX didn't have the same level as attention. So there was probably these same sort of things happening behind the scenes of like, it was called something different one day, it was called something another day that we didn't see because there wasn't this speculation because this thing had been delayed. So I think it's a lot to do with that as well.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of the thing with the Versus 15 divide, because like you guys were saying, we have nothing to compare it to. Like, we can only judge the finished product that came out, even if it was different to what the intention was. Like, it's not like we have two finished products to compare. Now, we might have in the future, because I know Nomura has talked about making a Verum Rex game. So for any of your non-Kingdom Hearts listeners, in Kingdom Hearts 3, there is a game called Verum Rex that is a very, very tongue-in-cheek allusion to Versus 13. It is a trailer that essentially has the 4 boys and then Stella, and it
has not Noctis in the car as well, doesn't it? Like, I laughed a lot
Noctis in the car.
The not Noctis Yuzora. in interviews about Kingdom Hearts 4, Namra has said, I didn't know which game to make first, Verum Rex or Kingdom Hearts 4. But then I said, you know what? People are really worried about Sora. They want to know where the hell Sora is. And so I decided to make Kingdom Hearts 4 first.
And then say nothing about it for 4
years.
Yeah,
and then go dead silent for 3 years. That's, yeah. I know you guys are so worried about him, so we're just going to go radio silent for 3 years. But for me, when I heard that, I was like, you motherfucker. You know how badly people want to know what the hell happened. So we might get a product to compare it to, which if I was Namra, I wouldn't be doing that, because I think he's in a spot right now where he actually never has to make Versus 13, because what he produced probably really 2008 to 2011, maybe halfway through 2012. What he produced there is like so beloved because people can project their own views of what it would be.
Yeah.
And a game that isn't finished and is only in our imaginations is always going to be the perfect game.
Yeah,
totally.
So I feel like if he does end up making this Verum Rex game, I feel like were I in his position, I wouldn't do it, because it's always going to be less than what people wanted it to be. People are always going to go, wait, that's it?
And not just that as well, but like it will never have its own identity, because it has now already leaned on the identity of Versus 13 so far, that it cannot be Final Fantasy Versus 13 by virtue of that was canned. It doesn't exist. It will never exist. And also they've renamed it Verum Rex. But by that exact same train of logic, it will never be just Verum Rex either. Yeah. It's very disingenuous to both. So I haven't played Kingdom Hearts 3. The last thing that I touched for Kingdom Hearts was 358 over 2 days. I played that. I'm one of like 5 people that actually really enjoyed that game.
Oh, I'm 2 of 5 people. I like that game.
Not just for the plot, by the way. I actually enjoyed the combat system.
Oh, you lost me there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I remember hearing about the Verum Rex stuff and being like, that's cute. Because like I was under the impression until, again, literally like last week, that it was just an in-universe ad, because it's in the Toy Story world, isn't it? It's an ad for a game that exists. And then I read a quote that's like, after the conclusion of the Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3 stuff, Nomura considered Verum Rex as the next game in the series and discussed it with the series co-director, and then eventually decided on 4 to be the next game because it would be difficult to develop 2 big console games at the same time. And I'm like, what in the fuck is going on in this man's head, actually?
Here we go again. 2 games at the same time.
Didn't learn his fucking lesson.
There was, I don't know if you guys remember, but there were leaks years and years ago. I mean, like 2016, 2017, where somebody said that there is a game that's going to be coming out. It's going to be called Versus 15. And it's like the bone that Square Enix threw to Tetsuya Nomura, being like, you can get to work on this project and it's going to be like this rehashed version of Versus. And people obviously laughed it off and was like, that's never happening. Why the hell would that happen? But the information in that leak was like, it's going to be showcased in Kingdom Hearts 3. It's going to be teased in this. And then it's going to come out after this. I can't remember if it was part 1 or part 2 of the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And it has now got a lot of people going, so was that always planned? Was that Verum Rex? Now, it might be bullshit, and it certainly does have lots of parts of it that sound like bullshit. But certainly the more we hear about Verum Rex, particularly the fact that Verum Rex, whether or not they're still doing it, but was discussed at some point of being this sort of standalone game. Yeah, I'm wondering now whether that stuff was true, because there were parts of that leak that never happened, that they were going to have something of like a playable, I don't know if you guys have seen Kingsglaive, but like a playable
dangerous question.
You mentioned it first.
Yeah, I know, but there some sort of playable Nyx DLC or some sort of game or some sort of leak into it, and that was going to bridge the gap, and obviously that never happened. So it is possible.
Thank God.
I know that the Versus 15 stuff, it's possible that was just a load of bullshit, and it's coincidental.
The worst part about what you've just said is that Kingsglaive was meant to be the first half of Final Fantasy 15. I'm gonna go
episode Aranea as well. R.I.P. episode Aranea.
R.I.P. episode Luna. That was the one we needed. What the hell? They were having all of this. But I think the thing about, so again, the more I research for this video, I'm possibly of the controversial opinion that I don't think episode Luna Freya would have done what people think it would have done for the characterization of Luna Freya. One, because the thing to remember about those, for Luna's in particular, that DLC was always non-canon.
Yeah, people do forget that. They all follow like the verse 2 ending, don't they?
Yeah, like it's based off an ending in episode Arden where you could take an alternative route.
Yeah.
Oh God.
But that's not the canon ending, and it's based entirely. It's essentially like a Marvel what if.
Yeah.
That's what, and I think for me that it's such an aggravating thing. Like I know I come off like, particularly when this video comes out, you guys be like, oh, this diehard Stella fangirl. Jesus, shut up. But I mean, I loved Luna. I was rooting for Luna to just have more, to be given more. That's my real problem with her. And I think when I read up about and people go, no, like Luna Freya was going to have all of this, and this is all of her canon. It's not her canon characterization.
Yeah.
I watched a great review of Final Fantasy 15 recently. Like, the whole thing, start to finish, was about 4 hours long. I'm insane. I watched every second of it. And the reviewer at the end of the video actually made a fantastic point of, I'm not going to play the DLC by choice because it's DLC. It should have been included in the base game, and I'm treating this as one full product, even though I have the Royal Edition. Oh, no, I think he played all 4 of the DLC except for Arden's. That was the one that he didn't get because that was another different edition. But, like, I think his stance on it by the end of his video was, I'm not going to read Dawn of the Future and find out what the could have beens were, the same way that I'm going to ignore verse 2 of Ignis's DLC, which is the non-canon stuff, because it is non-canon. It's wish fulfillment. And I wish that they had the guts to stick with a bad ending and just, this is what happens. It's nice to go, but everyone was happy and they lived happily ever after, and, you know, things were bad for a while, but it's cool. It's not cool. And I respect that from an artistic viewpoint as well. Pick a direction and fucking don't deviate.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, it's not like the Yokotaro games or flipping Nier games where there's multiple different endings and stuff like that, which do lead to different continuities. That's part of the way they get those games delivered.
And that man is insane. As anyone who knows me, that's another guy I want to fight in a car park.
Yeah, with his mask on. But the thing is, it's a tricky one because a lot of the conversation, I think, is certainly online, and I guess getting from what you're saying, May, is around Stella as a character. And it seems like Stella was going to be this brilliant character, and the direction that she was going, the relationship she had with unnamed male Final Fantasy protagonists.
We're really sticking to that one, huh?
Well, I mean, like, the point is, it might not have been Noctis. I mean, I read somewhere as well, as soon as you've invoked Kingsglaive, that apparently the Luna Freya character in that is Stella or something.
Yep.
Like, someone read that.
That was me. I linked you to that. It was a case of the bare bones models behind the scenes of that are, like, they're still Stella that's wearing Stella's clothing, and, like, I mean, we can all agree that Luna Freya in Kingsglaive acts nothing like Luna Freya in Final Fantasy 15. And okay, so this kind of actually ties really neatly into, like, you've mentioned leaks, May. There was one group of leaks which I found on a fucking GameSpot forum. Like, I was deep in the weeds doing my research for this.
I know.
Now, apparently originally this was a dump on 4chan with a lot of skepticism around it, but in hindsight, 8 years on from this post in June 2016. So
I know exactly the leak you're talking about. Yes. And everybody in the comment section is like, kill yourself. You're lying, you dirty troll.
Yep.
Go to hell.
All of the responses to this leak is like, this is fake as fuck. Like, why would you waste my time with this? And in hindsight, it's like, every single one of these things is correct. This is shit true. Like people saying that they didn't believe that Gentiana was Shiva. They didn't think Arden was going to be the final boss. They definitely didn't think that Luna was going to die. They definitely didn't think that there was going to be a time skip and that Noctis was old at the end of the game.
And no one else was.
And like, one of the things, so there were a couple of quotes that I actually cherry picked out from this one just because they were the most interesting. Obviously, as a leaker, a lot of people then responded to this OP and were like, okay, well, why this? Why that? And this person did give responses, and it's worth saying as well that the original poster of these leaks is an anonymous person, so we'll never know who this was. But one of the questions was, how could the game be so unfinished but still being worked on a few months from release? And the response was, it's not normal. The lock-in for English voice recording is supposed to be in 3 weeks, but they keep rewriting lines, and everyone is nervous as fuck about a September release. Expect a big day one patch. And it's like, yeah, remember hearing about that one. You know, a couple of the other things that I picked out in this leak was, why did they change the battle system from what was revealed at E3 2013? And the response was, that was a proof of concept based on Nomura's vision of what the game would have been and nothing more. Tabata was already changing it and the characters and story while it was already being made to show at E3. And it's like, again, so what is the truth? Like, we'll never know.
Okay, which is so interesting because in that leak, the person confirms, yeah, Nomura was still the director of that trailer. That is true. And Nomura said that himself, but also at the same time, like you said, proof of concept trailer, and Tabata was changing stuff behind it, which I believe. I believe that he was changing stuff behind the scenes.
Especially considering that's 2013. So we already know the end times from Nomura are coming. This is all in hindsight now.
And again, like that's what I'm saying about something happens between E3 and November, because if you guys remember that E3 trailer, the end of that is like something about a look at the world of Versus, or the world of, a world of I think it is World of Versus, but implying that this is going to be a universe.
Yeah. And
Nomura says at that press conference at E3, like, yeah, we're considering, it's such an expansive project now. We're considering bigger universe and a greater world and building it out. And then in November, he's like, sequels, not really sure, probably not. We haven't really, can't say, who's to know. But he was so confident in June that he had this added to the end of the trailer.
Yeah.
So something happens between...
Someone comes in and makes a decision.
Which I think at the time there was a change in, CEO.
Yeah.
So,
right, because it went from Yoichi Mada to Matsuda, didn't it?
Yes. And I think Matsuda has kind of going, right, we need to shore up what's profitable here and what's not. And we need to sort of really kind of tighten our belt here. And so
belt buckle.
Yeah, tighten our 16 belt buckles.
Oh, that was poor.
I mean, I think that's the only thing I can think of that would have changed it so rapidly. Because if Nomura knew that everything was being changed so quickly and so much behind the scenes by Tabata, and if he knew he was on his way out, I can't understand why he would have had World of included in the trailer and then been confident enough, this man who is so poor at consistent public updates, to say, oh, well, we're going to have an entire universe. And then in November go, oh, I don't know if there's ever going to be a sequel. Probably not. We don't know. Who knows? It's just out there. Something which is really interesting because, again, we'll never know.
I think it's also worth noting as well at this point that I don't know if this is in the final version of Final Fantasy 15. I never finished any side quest chain to its end because I'm a scrub like that. But I am just reading now, in the lead up to the release of FF15, there was a live stream made where Matsuda appeared as a level 99 boss for Noctis to face. And I know that they used Matsuda's likeness as a boss in Nier Automata as well. So the idea of Matsuda coming in and putting his foot down, and then like whoever decided to be like, yeah, fuck you, I wanted to spin my wheels forever. I know that's probably not the case, but that is tickling me right now.
Leave and take Stella with you.
From researching stuff about Versus 13, I have a couple of things that I would love to know. My first thing is I would love to know, because, we were talking about like how new of an industry game development is and how chaotic it can be.
Yeah.
In that Facebook post of Roberto Ferrari's, he says like his background before had been in illustrations for publishing. And he said his impression coming into the gaming industry was how chaotic it was, that he had never experienced that before, that it was so... coming from quite a rigid industry.
It's not exactly a glowing endorsement, is it?
No, I mean, I'm not sure if he got in trouble or if he was afraid of getting in trouble, but he did kind of have to clarify that he wasn't specifically talking about Square Enix's.
It just happened to coincide with this game that was on ice for like 10 years. And
oh yeah, but he was coming out like, Sakaguchi was right, there is no point in these AAA games anymore, y'all are stupid. Well, again, paraphrasing, to be very clear. But Ferrari had said it was so chaotic, and with game design kind of moving so fast, that when they're going in and making all of these changes to, from even the June 2013 version, if it was a proof of concept trailer, so much of the changes they make from then on are also really concerned with making sure they keep in enough of the stuff that had been built up with the hype.
Well, that's the thing. That's another line actually from this leak. There was a question very generic about Stella and, why had they decided to get rid of Stella? And the answer for this is a lot of the shift from Versus 13 to 15 is about an image, maintaining that image to keep fans and hype from Versus going. And they needed a blonde chick to replace Stella, and that's Luna. Luna isn't a slightly rewritten Stella, it's a completely different character. The point is, things have significantly changed in the game since then, and they're still changing it now 4 months before release. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, I kind of get the feeling that if they had been able to, they might have just, well, done away with Versus 13 and not used any of its bones for 15, but because they were in so deep, it's the ultimate sunk cost fallacy at that point. Like, especially for a game studio that you want to be making money and, you know, let's put out another MMO. Oh, that went disastrously, and we've spent all of this money on 2 different game engines. Like, I don't care what the end product is. You put it out and you make sure it makes money. We don't have the time to start from scratch. So I can't blame them for any of the decisions that they ended up making for 15. I can and I do criticize them, but I don't blame them.
I've got an interesting thought that's just popped into my head around what we just talked about with, we mentioned quite a lot around the female representation and obviously the difference between Stella and Luna Freya. They're clearly 2 different characters. All the stuff that was hyped up in the game, Stella was the only one that was removed because the design choice, the characters look reasonably similar and it's the same world largely, but Stella's the major omission. But I think it's really interesting, and I mean, you may have some stuff that you found that contradicts this, that everyone has a strong opinion about the difference between Luna Freya and Stella. And you just said there, let's put a blonde chick in it. And I think the fact that the fan base has responded to that kind of sexism there in a negative way is good, because at least the fan base aren't just satisfied by it just being a random blonde character, if that makes sense. I think that's, in a way, that's, I mean, obviously there may be some polarizing views either way, and people are like not bothered by Luna Freya as a character or not bothered by Stella as a character, and they don't mind either way. But it doesn't seem like there's anyone that's like, I don't care that it was changed, because what does it matter what the female character is? Everyone's got strong opinions about it, you know? Which I suppose gives me faith in the fan base somewhat.
There's definitely like a strong emerging among Final Fantasy 15 fans, like diehard 15 fans who are like, shut up about Versus 13, shut up about Versus 13, shut up about Versus 13. That like the version of Stella that we see in the 2013 trailer is just prototype Luna Freya. That was always going to be Luna Freya's story. They just reworked Stella slightly. And like you've quoted there in the leaks, but also like Tabata said repeatedly, they are 2 different characters. If they were similar characters, there would not have been a Luna Freya. There had to have been at least a strong enough narrative difference, because they kept everything else, but also they were well aware of how bad the backlash would be to remove one of the most beloved elements of this highly anticipated game. That's not an easy decision to make. It's only a decision you make if you really, really want to, or if it's really, really necessary. And so saying, well, Stella would have always been Luna Freya, well, then she would have still been Stella. Well, no, because they didn't want people to be mad because they would have changed her story. But the game was 25% complete. We've just said that. We didn't know much about Stella. The Luna Freya that we got, the parts of Luna Freya that we saw, could have been kept along with the parts of the Stella that we got. Do you know what I mean? They were able to rework so much else. Even in Kingsglaive, that scene at the party where they meet is very clearly an illusion.
Yes. Not even just an illusion. That's out and out XP. Like, it even has the painting of Etro behind Luna and Nyx.
You know, and I mean, I know the thing with Kingsglaive and 15 is that they had 2 different development cycles and that things had changed in between making Kingsglaive and making 15.
It's its own mess.
It's its own thing. But they are functionally 2 different characters. Like, I mean, there is another, I don't know if you guys have come across it, but there's another leak that happened later on in the year after that leak, where it was somebody
still in 2016.
Still in 2016. So it was it was after the game had come out, basically. And it was a user called Of Lushai, and they said that they'd worked on the game when it was 15. They didn't work on it when it was Versus, but they'd heard from a coworker who had, so it's sort of secondhand information, that the reason that they had changed Stella to Luna Freya was because Stella's actually killed before the game even begins by Noctis, who doesn't remember and is hallucinating her throughout the entire game. And that's why they created Luna Freya. And people kind of find that to be somewhat plausible, because we don't see Stella talking to anybody else in that trailer apart from Noctis. Her first solo shot of herself is with her back to us and the moon in the background. And
we already know that the whole point of that entire cutscene is them talking about how they can see the souls of the dead. So yeah, I can buy that.
So it's like it's a bit part of his psyche. It's like his, you know.
I actually think that sounds quite compelling.
Well, I reckon there's a way to get around it all. When we talked about stuff here with like semi-seriously now with the old Viren Rex.
Viren Rex, yeah.
What we got to do is we got to put Stella in the game and just have her enter the interdimensional rift with Gilgamesh.
Perfect. Done.
Sorted.
Plot contrivances solved.
Yeah, she just hangs along with Gilgamesh. Or maybe she is Gilgamesh.
Oh my god, that would be amazing. Just On the Bridge starts playing the minute you see. You're like, oh my god.
But I'll tell you what, that would be cool. I mean, it's a bit of a meta thing. This is an interesting activity because when we get the podcasts out there, they're not that frequent. So we don't do like news reaction stuff very much. We might refer to things that are going on. But it's interesting most of this is based off of speculation.
Yeah.
So, because it doesn't really exist, realistically, the whole idea with 13 is it just exists in people's minds and talking about it.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And like,
yes.
Even that thing with Stella being dead before the game even begins, a lot of people want to believe that that's true because they're like, yes, suck it, Stella fans. You guys were bitching the whole time that Stella was the better character. Joke's on you. She was dead before the game even began. Because I think that's for some people a plausible reason why Tabitha would have been like, Lunafreya is a strong independent character. You don't meet her until chapter 9 and then she dies immediately. For some people, that's, well, at least she made the choice to die. Stella's just murdered. I can kind of see why that would be plausible for that reason that, like, I don't think it's plausible enough personally. If you're that adamant that, like, well, we need to give her character somewhat before she dies. You know, I don't know how much. I think I'm pretty 50-50 on whether or not it's true.
It all comes back down to we'll never know. And I think that's fine. I can't help but feel like the myth of Versus 13 in itself is going to be one of those things that it's been 10 years, almost exactly 10 years since 15 released. We're still talking about Versus 13. We're doing an entire episode on this. There's no getting away from this. And I can't help but feel like even if we never hear anything else about Versus 13 again, whether that be Viren Rex or Versus 15 or someone makes Versus 13 in Unity or whatever, I can't help but feel like its own legend being built up this way and then just falling off is kind of cool in its own way. It almost feels as solid as an entry into the Final Fantasy series, despite not fucking being a game, which is...
no, I do agree.
I can't say that for a lot of things. Good job, Square Enix, maybe?
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Potentially.
Yeah.
The question is, if we ever do the top women in Final Fantasy thing that we've talked about, would we include Stella on that list?
Oh, controversial, yeah.
I think we have to, just for a laugh.
Just to see the world
just
explode.
upset everyone.
Because you see, we don't know what one leak says. Stella died before the game began. Another leak says that Stella is actually one of the only characters that survives till the end of the game. Then what leak do you believe? Yeah. Both leaks either can't be proven because there's stuff we will never have access to, like what happened behind the scenes, or they have one or two things that make them sound plausible, but we'll never know because we'll never know behind the scenes. Like, it's really a case of what you want to believe.
At the end of the day, if you want more Fabula Nova Crystallis, go play the 13 trilogy, go play Type 0, and then cry into your pillow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ever going to play Type 0 unless you make me.
You know I'm going to.
Oh, God.
So I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up, because I don't know about you guys, I don't have anything else to talk about.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to talk about. The game doesn't exist.
There's nothing else ready to talk about. I think it's probably worth me mentioning the remaining games of the year.
Oh, yes, we did skip over those.
Just to fill in the blank. 2009, do you know what 2009's was?
I'm going to save you some time, Jack. I don't know what any of them was.
Is it worth asking you what any of them are?
Time, Jack. I don't know them either. Me and Mal are just sitting in the corner like, teach us.
Right, I don't want to embarrass you. Okay, so 2009 was Uncharted 2 Amongst Thieves.
Okay.
2010 was Red Dead Redemption. 2011, you might know this one. You maybe might know this one. No.
I don't remember what I was doing last week.
Elder Scrolls.
Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. Because it's got Game of the Year edition.
Okay, so that was the Game of the Year for every year following then, right?
Yeah. 2012 was Journey. And 2013 was The Last of Us.
Right.
Which, again, brings us into how long ago this was, considering there's now a second series of the TV show of The Last of Us, which is 12 years on. So that brings us, like, when this was announced, was Gears of War all the way to The Last of Us. There was a massive load, like...
And notably, none of those games were Final Fantasy. Can't help but notice that.
Yeah, I think, what was it? Was there the most major release between them? Where we sort of like touched upon releases from Square in that time. The most major Final Fantasy release between Versus 13 being announced and that 15 coming out. There's obviously the spin-offs was 14. The the spin-offs to 13, and the compilation stuff. So it's all been side story stuff. And to be fair, I mean, obviously we've dunked the compilation quite a bit for 7, but like a lot of that stuff was relatively successful. And I think, to be fair with some of that stuff, the Fabula Novella stuff was essentially going to be like a compilation of 13. It was the next expansion upon what they did with Final Fantasy VII.
Maybe the real mistake was in planning that ahead of time, because 7 wasn't meant to be a compilation back in the day, was it?
No.
Well, they came up with Advent Children, and then they went, let's celebrate its anniversary, I guess, and they made Advent Children.
And then they introduced Genesis.
Before Crisis, let's not go there. Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus. Now, they're all to varying levels of quality, should we say, but at least they're complete products and they exist.
Yeah.
You know? Say what you like about Dirge of Cerberus, which, we will at some
we
point.
absolutely will say what we
Game
want.
of the year, Dirge of Cerberus.
Oh my God, that's just... But it's there.
Yeah.
They went, right, this is our end result. It's not going to be as good. But I think with this, it seems like, again, we're not knowing behind the scenes stuff was going on. There's lots of overreaching. Let's make it this legendary thing. It's been picked up on everyone's heads. It's been this amazing, sexy, overreaching thing. Essentially, that's what they've done with the 7 remake project. Is it coming? Is it coming for years? Tech demo after tech demo. And eventually they went, you know what? We're fucking doing it.
I was just thinking, in our 14 episode, I know I spent a great deal of time explaining the 1.0 legacy version to you and how that was, nuked from orbit, and 14 was rebuilt from the ground up on a completely different engine, not Crystal tools. And I think it's probably fair to call 14 legacy abandonware. But it doesn't feel like abandonware so much because the same world was repurposed and we now have a complete product and it's still ongoing and stuff like that. It doesn't feel like abandonware the same way that Versus 13 and 15 are abandonware, which was how I felt directly after finishing 15 for the first time, knowing that I now had bits of DLC to complete. And that if I wanted to restart the game, I was going to see Ignis's face on those billboards at Golden Key because of that final photography competition that they did back in the day, and they've just never replaced it, and they never will, because they abandoned 15, and they've abandoned Versus 13, and it's just a very strange place to be in as a consumer looking at this product and going, what do I call you?
Considering the fact of 15 was supposed to be that they wouldn't develop any more titles, they just develop within that environment and that space. Kind of like they did with the original Tomb Raiders. They had 5 games made in the same engine. Why not? It makes sense, save a bit of money. But yeah, clearly for some reason, I mean, it was a massive financial success, 15. I don't think it was a flop, was it?
It wasn't a flop, but I don't think it did quite as well as you're probably envisioning.
No, I know that 16 didn't.
Nah.
Yeah. I think as well that Square had lost a lot of money on Luminous Productions at the time. So I think 15 had sold certainly better than they were expecting with the whole controversy, but not enough for them to recoup back the huge losses they'd suffered.
Yeah.
That kind of balanced off what really would have been somewhat of an impressive result in terms of sales. They just had huge debt.
I think if there's one thing that we can all take away from this, it's don't be in debt. Or don't make yourself go into debt while you're creating a product. Have an idea for the product ready when you show it off, and also just don't fuck it up that badly, which I think we're all probably safe from, so woohoo.
Yeah, and don't do crystal tools even once.
And like if you've got an idea well, the thing is, you can release a concept for something in an unfinished format that's not quite what you want it to be, and then revisit it later. We talked about that with the games with Final Fantasy. And obviously, you mentioned, although it was offline, mate, but Final Fantasy VIII, the idea of the Laguna and Squall dynamic being better represented in Final Fantasy X with Jecht and Tidus.
I mean, that's it. Like that was just what they were doing at that time. They weren't making sequels, and you can tell though. Like when I read that, and then I went back to 10, I can totally see what they would have or were trying to do with Squall and Laguna in Jecht and Tidus.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a nice thing at the time when they had obviously a shorter development cycle and they didn't have sequels and they didn't have universes to expand them. You could see the lessons they'd learned or the things they'd cut in one game in another game. Whereas I don't know, like 15 had to use the things from its predecessor because the hype had been built and they needed people to buy this game. And I don't know that I see that in 16 either. Like, I don't see the lessons learned from 15 in 16 other than just don't fuck it up so badly. I think their whole thing with 16 was just make this as different as possible from 15 and just kind of put all that behind us and go to, you know, the really popular Evil East world and build on our successful kind of reputation with 14, you know?
Pretend it didn't happen and people will forget. That's not true, Square. We're still here.
We never forget.
So I think my absolute final question to both of you, and I think I already know what the answer is if we ever get Versus 13 in any format, be that Virum Rex or its own thing, are you guys going to play it?
Of course I'm going to play
Hell yeah.
Thought so, and I'm right there with you.
So I guess we should close it out then. So a question for you, May. Where can everyone find you online?
If you still want to hear more from me at the end of this, or if you just want to tell me how wrong I am about everything, you can find me at Game Dove on YouTube. I don't actually have any socials for my channel. I should probably start them. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, of course.
Cool, brilliant. Thank you for coming. What about you, Mark?
Yes, as usual, I can be found at Adramalak on both Twitter and Blue Sky, and of course, EXP Podcast on YouTube. What about yourself, Jack?
Yeah, EXP Podcast on YouTube. EXP Required is on Blue Sky. It's on Twitter as well. I'm on Twitter just about JackMullen8 and JackieBoy34 everywhere else. So thank you very much for joining again, mate. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much. I was so looking forward to this, and you didn't disappoint.
Pleasure as always. Love coming to chat. So
brilliant. Thank you, guys. Bye.
That's right.
Bye.
Bye.